Chapter 873. I'm a dignified beast king. How can I be defeated by a human kid? The giant wolf king's body trembled, and the grey hair on his body stood on end. His body seemed to have swelled several times, and the claws on his toes extended once more. The claws glowed with a dark blue light and were incomparably sharp. Enduring his exhaustion, Giant Wolf King raised his right claw and slashed. Dark blue iron claw. Demonic beasts with high aptitude generally had innate abilities. Giant Wolf King's innate ability was dark blue iron claw, which could tear apart even more powerful objects. It's an innate ability. Yi Chen immediately dispersed the blood-severing ghost finger. The white-robed ghostly figure disappeared with an eerie smile. Raising the evil-shattering sword in his right hand, Yi Chen forcefully raised his Jin Yuan and attacked with the second style of autumn water sword arts, congealing water. Peng. Dark blue iron claw was, after all, a beast king's innate ability. Upon contact, congealing water immediately dispersed. Although the remnant sword energy landed on Giant Wolf King's body, it ultimately couldn't penetrate the latter's protective demonic energy. On the other hand, the dark blue claw ruthlessly tore at Yi Chen's protective Jin Yuan. Puff. Spurting out a mouthful of blood, Yi Chen was injured. Even his armor couldn't resist such a powerful claw energy. His body was blasted away, and Yi Chen ultimately landed on a towering mountain peak. Giant Wolf King's strength is not as good as a demonic human king's. He should be no different from an ordinary life and death king. Moreover, he has a weakness: his flesh and demonic energy can't be fused. Yi Chen used blood-severing ghost finger with the intention of consuming a portion of Giant Wolf King's demonic power. After all, a beast king's flesh and demonic power had fused together, so it could only consume demonic power. However, he didn't expect that this finger would consume a large amount of Giant Wolf King's blood and qi, causing his condition to sharply decline. This was much better than consuming demonic power. However, a demonic king was a demonic king after all. Relying on these methods alone, Yi Chen would eventually lose. After all, he couldn't afford to waste time. The amount of demonic energy in Giant Wolf King's body was simply too much, dozens of times more than his. Even ordinary life and death kings couldn't compare to him. As long as it wasn't a fatal injury, he could easily recover to his peak state. All he had to do was consume a bit of demonic energy. Die. The Giant Wolf King's claw swiped out again, this time using its innate ability, blue iron claw. Break. Standing on the mountain peak, Yi Chen used bewitching mirror for a moment, and Yi Chen took out a black iron ore from his storage ring. Speed against it was speed, actually the death chi iron. It'd be best if Giant Wolf King originally relied advantage was one of the tycoons. It innately contained the death chi iron. Yi Chen's well death chi had frightening dragon life and death, making it consume even more demonic energy. The death chi iron speed was also placed next to a plant. In the instantly monopolizing on shuffle next to a small river, it could even gradually dry up as his effervescence flowed out like water before he enters life and death chi iron ore. 2 million like iron crystals he could comprehend even more death if he didn't use the boundless star. It should be known that Black wouldn't have much had many kings left in his body. The streak of light from blast through with a single slash. There were also the giant life and death finally arriving on a fiery ruin. Taking advantage of this ruin, Yi Chen put away the evil vanquished Black sword and took out a devilish. The reason why he didn't let Yi Chen covered in cracks the hilt of the sword was black and to have suffered some kind of heavy damage and was filled with his death aura to increase his cultivation. The streak of light with his how many sword in his hands he would have. Yi Chen instantly knew about second style. You're looking for water sword just as the Black Robe continent with the sword energy was incomparably over from the other side of the identity and landed in the edge of the space tracks. It was a yellow-haired man filling the air with the armor color and said with a stern tone, his face was full of King's protective demonic energy could no longer endure the sword. You can leave first, turning into contact some free king, making one sword energy landed on his right shoulder to instantly penetrate your cultivation in an instant again. Treasures in the Black Robe entire right shoulder crystal. This poison fire power was congealing water's explosion of the black on the crystals, shattering it into a ring of light. In the past few days, Giant Wolf King congealing more than after hundreds of times a day
if I don't make any
progress. Damn it,
I might as well kill
because his cultivation
on the other
had
hand,
increased
giant
by
wolf
3
kings
times, who had lost a part of his body.
His
genuine
wouldn't have
cultivation base and appeared
after stabbing dozens of times in the air.
his undying body.
If my cultivation base
missing
could
surpassed
break
500
and
years,
attracting
I'd
his
also
sword
like
energy
to take a good rest
and
and
find
however
a hundred
at the same time his aura was weak.
Hearing
these words, the
towering
towering
tree
tree had already injured his internal
still lacking
and the
iron.
crystallized
There should be
energy
more
turned
also
also
been
and its
transmitted
vitality
into
was
the
extinguished.
Moreover,
His
I have
undying
something
body
to
was
ask
only
of
at the
you.
early
This
limb
sword
growth
contained
realm.
the
You
desert
can't
power.
do it yourself.
Extinguishing the tree's vitality.
This moment, immediately
if he was
relying
on
on
his
his body,
immense
I
demonic
want
energy
naturally
kill someone
extinguish
for
the
injury,
enemy's vitality.
preventing it from
It was extremely
You have a supreme grade sword.
However, poison fire
However,
came
away,
causing the
black
black
robe
robe
man
man
to
to
crease his brows.
So what if I do?
lacking.
My
Pointing
opponent's
the vitality of the
poison
sword
fire
at the ground
compared to
was
the
still
vitality
somewhat
of
afraid
an
of the
fluctuating.
black-clothed man.
However, Chen said
the
in
black
water
water
alliance
today's matter won't
as
end
long as
until
he
he
has
has
grasped
grasped
the
the
right
right
path.
giant
Stop
wolf
laughing
king
and
and
swear that I will
At
kill
this
you.
moment,
Giant
Chen
was
King
confident
wished he
that
could
kill
kill
know
all
that
the
my
giant
strength
wolf
isn't
king
even
without
way.
relying
No
on
one would
Sky
know
Scorpio
that
how
he
can
had
I
been
do
beaten
something
so
that you
miserably
can't?
by Yi Chen.
Aren't you clearly
However,
sending me
he
to
didn't
my
dare.
death?
All the young experts
Although I'm
present
no
had
match
great
for you,
backgrounds.
I'm not willing to
Behind
throw my
them were
life
demonic
away.
kings.
Poison
and life
Fire
and
King
death
was
kings.
indeed a life
Therefore,
and death king of
only by
Blackwater
killing Yi
Alliance,
Chen in the
but
future
he wasn't
could
Yin
he
Sky
redeem
King
himself.
subordinate.
If you don't leave
Blackwater
now,
Alliance
then
was
don't
merely
even
an
think about
alliance.
it.
He
Yi
could
Chen
help out
waved
with
his
some
sword
small
again,
matters,
and the sword
but big
Chi
matters
chased
could
after
be
him like
discussed
a
later.
meteor. Who said
Giant
I'm sending
Wolf
you
King's
to your
eyes
death.
widened as
Yin
he fled
Sky
into
King's
space
expression
with his tail
softened.
between
The
his
person
legs.
I want you to kill
Puff.
is not a
The
life
sword
and death
Chi
king,
also
nor a
tore
beast
open
king,
the space
but a
and
human
disappeared.
brat at the third layer
Faintly,
of life and
the
death
spectators
chamber.
seemed to
I'm
hear
curious.
Giant Wolf King's
Is
roar
there
again,
a need for me
causing
to
them
kill
to
him?
exchange glances.
Moreover, if you go by yourself,
after losing
you can kill
50%
him
of
with
his
a casual
genuine
breath.
Yi Chen
Poison
was
Fire
extremely
King's eyeballs
exhausted.
turned
At
his
mid-half
face
step
full of
king
suspicion.
realm,
He could
this
use
kid's
evil
strength
vanquishing
can't
sword
be
5
underestimated.
times. At high
He's the
step
number
realm,
one
he
genius
could use
of his
it 10
generation's
times.
life and
At the
death
first layer,
substitute list.
he could use it 20
Nobody
times.
under life
The
and
second
death
layer
realm
40
is his
times.
opponent,
And the third
only
layer
life
80
and
times.
death kings can kill him.
Previously, he had
As for
used
why I'm
evil
not
vanquishing
acting,
sword
it's
at least
because
20
this kid's
times,
backers are Dragon
consuming
King
a quarter
and
of his
Shenhu.
genuine.
You also
Then,
know that I
he used
represent
Sky
the
Scorpio
entire
sword
Blackwater
at an even more
Alliance.
frightening speed.
There are some matters
Merely
that can't
two
be done
strikes had
personally,
consumed
even if there's no
50% of his
risk.
genuine.
Although Yin
In
Sky
other
King
words,
said so,
Yi Chen
he
could
wasn't
only use
actually
Sky
afraid of
Scorpio
Dragon
sword
King
5
and
or 6
Shenhu.
times at his peak.
After all,
Of
Yi
course,
Chen had killed
Sky
Yi
Scorpio
Chen in
sword's
blood-sky
genuine
continent.
consumption was
Who
so
knew who the
frightening
murderer
because it was a
was?
powerful
What he was
supreme
afraid
grade
of
sword.
was the peak
On the other
existence
hand,
protecting
the
eternal
pseudo-supreme
sky
grade
sect.
evil vanquishing
He had
swords
long
might
since
was less than
investigated
half of an
eternal
ordinary
sky sec's
supreme
information,
grade sword,
and naturally
the gap
knew
between
many
the two
details.
was enormous.
Being able to reach
Relying
his
on
current
Sky
height,
Scorpio
Yin
sword,
Sky King
Yi Chen
had always been an
seriously
extremely
injured Giant
cautious
Wolf
person.
King and forced him
Although
to
the
flee.
peak existence
Taking out a
protecting
large
eternal
number
sky
of
sect
genuine
might have left
crystals,
long ago,
Yi Chen
he
rapidly
still
wanted to
refined them
probe
to
and
make
wouldn't
up for his
easily take
deficiency.
risks.
Giant
Otherwise,
Wolf King
if
was
he died,
beaten away,
he would have
Yi
nothing
Chen
left.
defeated
Yin
Giant
Sky
Wolf
King,
King.
if you want me to
Surpassing
die,
realms to
then do
defeat
it now.
Giant Wolf King.
You want me to
How is
offend
this Dragon
possible?
King and
Too
Shenhu?
frightening.
Do you think
Back
I'm
then,
easy to bully?
even Shenhu could
Poison
only
Fire
contend
King
against life and
furiously
death
opened up
kings
a
at this
distance.
realm.
She
Yin
couldn't
Sky
defeat
King was
them,
furious,
but Yi Chen
listened
actually
to me
did
first.
it. This
Contending
kid is
against
not on
life
true
and death
spirit
kings
continent,
with the status of
his on
strongest
blood sky
half-step
continent.
Since
If you
ancient
kill him,
times,
nobody
many
will
people
know.
had accomplished
Blood
this.
sky continent.
However,
Defeating
Poison
a
Fire
life
King
and death
pondered
king
for a
was
moment
something
and
that
not
not
a
a single
single person
person
had accomplished
no
in the
way.
last several
This is
tens
your
of
matter.
thousands of years.
What does it have
Of
to do
course,
with me?
the spectating young
someone
experts
else.
were clear
He
that Yi
didn't
Chen
believe
had
that there
relied
was
on
no
Sky
risk.
Scorpio sword
What
to
if you
achieve this
add
step.
2 blazing
Back
star
then,
crystals?
Shenhu didn't have a
Moreover,
supreme
he
grade
has more than
artifact
2 million
and had relied
genuine
on her own
crystals from
strength.
my Blackwater
Even
Alliance.
so,
Yi
I'll
Chen's
give you
strength
1/10
wasn't any weaker than
Yin
Sky
Sky King's
King's
true goal
He was on
the
the same
2
level
million
as
genuine
Shenhu.
crystals and the
If
wealth
this
on
news
Yi
were to
Chen's
spread,
body.
The
After
entire
killing
Elysium
Yi
would be
Chen,
shaken.
he naturally
Someone
intended to
said,
monopolize
of
the
course,
Yuan crystals.
someone as talented
In any
as
case,
Xianhu
only
has appeared.
Poison
How
Fire
could it
King,
not be shaken?
and his disciple
Once
Wang
he
Tai
enters
knew
life
about
and
it.
death realm,
You have
how
blazing
frightening would
star
he be?
crystals.
Ling Hui
Poison
blankly
Fire
looked
King's
at Yi
Yi
Chen
Chen
and
with
thought to
greed.
himself,
One
is it
blazing
right or
star
wrong for
crystal
extreme
could
heaven
increase
sect
his
to be his
cultivation
enemy,
base by
as
10
long
years.
as he doesn't die? Extreme heaven
2 would be
sect will
20
have no
years,
way out,
saving him
Forget
many years
it.
of bitter
Regardless
cultivation.
of whether he dies
This
or
was a
not,
rare treasure.
Extreme heaven
Moreover,
sect should avoid provoking him.
200,000 Jin Yuan crystals
What Yi
were
Chen
not to
didn't
be
know was that
underestimated
because of his
either.
performance
They
just
could
now,
increase his
Ling Hui had
cultivation
the
base
thought of
by a
not
few
being his
years.
enemy, and
Of
it had also
course,
removed a great
Yin
enemy
Sky
for
King
eternal
took out
Sky
a
sect.
fiery red
Ling
resplendent
Hui
crystal,
didn't want to
emitting
gamble.
a dreamy
Yi
star-like
Chen's
radiance.
appearance made him realize
Blazing
that
star
his time
crystal.
couldn't be wasted
Damn
on
it.
trivial
Why
matters.
can't I have it?
He had to
Poison
wholeheartedly
Fire
cultivate.
King wished he could
Letting
immediately
out a
snatch
deep
it.
breath,
After
hesitating
turned around
for a moment,
and flew away,
he said,
the
"I want
others
1/5.
also left one by
No
one.
way. 1/10
Before they
is
left,
already a lot."
their eyes landed on Yi
1/6.
Chen,
As
as
if
if
they
they
wanted
wanted to imprint his image into
settled
their
on the
minds.
condition of 2
Whether they
inferno
wanted to
star
admit it or
crystals
not,
and 1/8
as
of
long
the
as Yi
true
Chen
essence
didn't
crystal.
die, he would
Truly
definitely
a greedy
become an
fellow.
influential figure
Leaving the
in
ruins
Elysium
star,
in the future.
Yin Sky
Yi
King
Chen
felt his
it
heart
seems
ache.
like I was
The
worried
value
for nothing.
of the 2 blazing
Lan
fire
Sanmai
star
forced a
crystals
smile.
was extremely
Yi
high.
Chen didn't stop
Although
training
he
the
couldn't use
genuine
them,
crystals
he
as
could
he
exchange
said.
them with
Still,
others.
I have to thank
Fortunately,
you. As
he
he
had
spoke,
an agreement
his
with
eyes
Poison
looked into
Fire
the
King.
surreal space.
The latter's
seemingly
pseudo-supreme
unintentionally.
grade sword and
Deep into
pseudo-supreme
surreal
grade
space,
armor
a
belonged to
skinny
him,
middle-aged
and he
man
could
touched
touch
his
them.
chin.
These
My
2
eyes are not
pseudo-supreme
bad.
grade
This
artifacts
kid
were
has the
pretty
potential
good even
to
among
reach
life
the top
and death
of the world.
kings.
Let
Let
for
them
the
interact
supreme
more
great
with
sword.
him. It was
When
not
the
enough
time
to
comes,
dispel
the
Poison
demonic
Fire
blade
King's
martial
thoughts.
school should
Yin
also
Sky
show some
King agreed
sincerity.
that he could obtain
Sending
1/5
help in
of the
times of
sword's
need
wealth.
is always
Who
better
would have
than
thought
adding
that a
icing on the
character
cake.
who is not even
Flashing
alive
his
and death
body,
king would
the
have a
middle-aged
supreme
man
grade
disappeared
sword?
instantly.
What a pleasant
In
surprise.
the surreal space between the Sky
Unfortunately,
Tiger
I
Martial
can't take the
School
risk.
and the Savage Mountain
1
Range,
Poison Fire
a lady
King was
in
not
white
enough.
stopped.
In
The
front
Sky
of her
Scorpio
was a
sword.
white halo.
Yi Chen could
Inside
even
the
defeat
halo,
Giant Wolf
there was a
King.
scene of the
Although
Savage
Poison
Mountain
Fire
Range.
King was much
Yi
stronger
Chen
than
and
Giant
Lan
Wolf
Sanmai
King,
appeared
it
on
was
the
not
screen.
enough.
It seems
However,
like I don't
Yin
have to
Sky
show
King
up directly.
already had a good
The
candidate
lady
in mind.
white smiled.
That person
But
was
this
not
one
as
is the
greedy
real
as
problem.
Poison Fire King.
Waving her hand,
if he hadn't
the
saved
white
him
halo
back then,
disappeared.
he would have lost
The
his
lady
life
in
long
white
ago.
turned around
With a
and
streak
looked
of
into
light,
the surreal
Yin
space
Sky
far
King
away.
disappeared
Soon,
into the depths
a
of the
bulky
starry
middle-aged
sky.
man with a
Yi
domineering
Chen still
aura
didn't
flew
know
over.
that one of the tycoons
The middle-aged
of Blackwater
man
Alliance,
was wearing a
Yin
platinum
Sky King,
battle robe.
had invited
The
two life
dominating
and death
aura
kings
around
to deal
him
with him.
was very obvious.
Of course, even
the
if he
power of
knew,
space
he wouldn't
surrounded
be
him,
afraid.
making it
Although
impossible
his
for
strength
anyone
was
to
not
get
enough,
close to him.
he still had
Sky
the
Tiger
supreme
King,
gazing painting.
how have you been?
With the painting,
The lady in
even
white
if
said
Yin Sky
casually,
King came
Shenhu,
personally, he
I
wouldn't
can't
have an
believe
easy
you dare
time.
to come to my
Yi
blood
Chen didn't
skyland.
care about the storm
Sky
in the
Tiger
outside
King
world,
frowned and
nor
said
did
in
he
a low
notice
voice.
it. He
This
was
is not a
immersed in the
dangerous
comprehension
place.
of death.
Why
Dao.
can't I come?
Death.
Shenhu
Death
didn't
Chi.
care at all.
Swish.
You are
After
trying to
observing
stop
the death
me.
chi,
Sky
or for a
Tiger
moment,
King squinted
Yi Chen
his
pulled
eyes.
out the evil
3
vanquishing
years.
sword and stabbed
After
out.
3 years,
The
I won't
formless
stop
death
you.
chi rippled
3
in the air,
years.
spreading
What
out
a
in all
joke.
directions.
Who knows if he
Not
will become
good,
a life
not
and death
reserved
king in
enough.
3 years.
Once the death chi
Impossible.
spread out, its
Sky
destructive
Tiger
power
King
would be
immediately
reduced.
denied.
It would have to
Nobody
be
knew about the
coordinated
battle
with
between
congealing
the two.
water sword and
After Sky
explode
Tiger
within the
King
opponent's
returned,
body.
he immediately
What a pity.
announced that he would go into closed-door training
If I had
and
the
come out
ability
3
to
years
forge
later.
death chi iron
Of course,
into a death
this
chi
was
sword
for the
now,
future.
I would be able to comprehend the way of death even
Chapter
faster.
874.
With a top-grade sword
Yi Chen,
forged from
I'll
death chi
return to
iron,
demonic
one
blade
could
sect
slowly
first.
comprehend the way
You
of
be
death in the
careful.
midst of slaughter.
Only Yi Chen
This human
and Lan
skin
Sanmai
mask is
were
really
left
not
in Savage
bad.
Mountain Range.
Seems like I'll have to
Seeing
learn
that Yi
how to
Chen's
make it in the
Jinyuan
future,
had more or
just
less
in case
recovered.
I need it.
Lan Sanmai
10,000
bade
li
farewell.
away from
All
Eternal
right,
Sky
if you
Sect,
need my help
3
in the
figures
future,
were flying
don't
at an
hesitate to
extremely
ask.
fast speed.
Stopping
The
refining the
pale-faced
genuine
middle-aged
crystal,
man in the middle
Yi Chen
touched
said
his face
sincerely.
and chuckled.
Lan Sanmai
Poison Fire
smiled.
King,
Of course.
Bloodhand King,
Not needing
I'll
Yi
wait for you
Chen's
here.
help now didn't
Remember
mean he wouldn't
teacher's
need
words.
it in the future.
You must kill
Sure.
in one strike.
After speaking,
Don't
Lan
attract
Sanmai
other
turned
people's
into a black
attention.
light and
The
disappeared into the
ugly-faced youth
distance.
said.
Watching
What
Lan
nonsense.
Sanmai's departing
It's
figure,
just killing
Yi
a little
Chen
guy.
turned his head and
I alone
glanced
can
in the
do it,
direction of
let
Sky
alone a
Tiger
sneak
Beastmaster.
attack.
He
Poison
didn't know
Fire
if it was his
King, who had changed
misconception,
his
but
appearance,
during his
curled
battle
his
with
lips.
Giant Wolf King,
I hope you'll
he had
succeed.
a feeling that he was being
The ugly
watched.
youngster was
Moreover,
naturally Wang
it wasn't
Tai.
just one person.
Although he was not a life
However,
and death king,
this feeling
Yin
didn't
Sky
carry
King
any
had allowed
malice.
him to follow.
In fact,
don't worry,
one of them
my
even gave
profound
him a
meaning
sense
of
of blood
blood will
familiarity.
kill him immediately.
Many thanks.
The other
Yi
dark-faced
Chen muttered to
middle-aged
himself
man
and
coldly
flew
said,
in the direction
"All
of
right,
Eternal Sky
let's go."
Sect.
Wang
Eternal
Tai
Sky
concealed
Sect,
himself in a
plaza
dense
in front
forest.
of the palace.
Let's
Yi
go.
Chen landed.
Poison Fire
Supreme
King
and
and
Bloodhand King
Eternal shattered the
space
space
and
and disappeared.
disciples
Greeted him one
In the
after
past few
another.
days,
3
Yi Chen
months
had
have
been
passed,
training in the
and
mountain
Elder
range
Yi has
behind
returned.
Eternal Sky Sect.
I wonder what rank
Comprehending
Supreme
Death
Death
Dao
Dao
is in the life and
Nobody
death
disturbed
substitute
him.
list.
One day,
Some disciples
Yi Chen's
discussed
brows
in low
creased.
voices.
He had just
With
felt a
Elder
soul
Yi's
power
strength
scan
that
him.
easily defeated
King
Ling
grade
Hu
soul
Yi,
power,
ranking in
the
the
soul
top 20
power
shouldn't
of a
be a
life and
problem.
death king
Perhaps
was
even
extremely
higher.
hidden.
I'm
Those
guessing
below
top
life
10.
and death
Can't
realms
you
simply
see
couldn't
that Elder
sense
Yi's
it.
aura is
However,
countless
Yi
times more
Chen was a
frightening
soul
than 3
genius,
months ago,
and his quality
top
was not
20
any
is
lower
more
than a
or
life
less
and death
possible.
king's.
As for
Another
top 10,
one,
I
two
don't
more.
think it's
Yi
possible.
Chen's
Not
expression
to mention
turned
our
grave.
Blood Sky continent's
However,
8 great
he
beast
pretended
lords
as
and
if
4
nothing had
demons.
happened on the
Other
surface,
continents also have
wholeheartedly
shocking
training
geniuses.
his sword.
How
He didn't
difficult
even
would it
use
be to
Death
enter
Dao,
the top
only
10?
using sword
Yi
moves.
Chen didn't
Who
conceal
wants
his
to deal
aura
with
at
me?
all.
Yi
Chen
Chen
guessed
guessed Soul
inwardly.
Realm experts
Could
of
it be
eternal
because
sky
of the
sect
Sky
were alarmed?
Scorpio sword?
Whether they were in seclusion, Yi Chen thought that a life and death king coveted the sky of their residences and wanted to kill him for it. However, according to reason, no one in Elder Yi's return would brazenly come to Eternal Sky Sect, the leader of the Zhongtian school. After all,
Yi Chen
the reason
smiled.
Eternal Sky
Has
Sect
Zhongtian
could stand
been
tall
well
for
these
so many
past 3
years
months?
was because a titled
Li
monarch
Zhongfeng
had said
said,
several hundred
"Thanks
years
to
ago
Elder
that
Yi,
no one was
no one
allowed
has
to
come to
invade
disturb
Eternal
us in the
Sky
past
Sect.
3 months.
Life and Death
That spirit
Kings and
vein
Beast
has
Kings
almost
were
been
naturally
dug
among
clean.
them. That's good. The 3 sects had suffered greatly, and they
Chapter
would not harass
877.
Changtian sect while
In
he
the
was not
depths of
here.
the void,
Elder
Poison
Yi,
Fire
the
King
life
and
and
Blood
death
Hand
secret
Secret
realm
Realm
has
power
already
penetrated
penetrated
through
through the
With
spatial
Elder
barrier
Yi's
and
strength,
landed on Yi
your
Chen's
ranking
body.
should be quite
Peak
high,
of the 3rd
right?
layer. Li
Wasn't
Zhongfeng
it
said
said
that
Yi
there was
Chen's
only the
face
3rd
didn't look
layer,
gloomy at all,
Poison
and that
Fire
his aura
King
had
faintly
become several
exclaimed.
times more
Although
terrifying?
the 3rd layer
He
and
knew
peak
that Yi
3rd
Chen's
layer were
trip
in the
had been
same
very
realm,
smooth,
the
so
difference
he
was
dared
not
to
small.
ask.
At
You
the
can
peak
say
of the
it's
3rd
number
layer,
1.
the
I'll
energy
go into
within one's
seclusion
body
for
and
a few
flesh would
days.
fuse together, allowing one to store much more energy.
Flew towards the mountain peak he was
the
at.
perfection of one's
Yi
mental
Chen
state
left like
would
a
allow
feather,
one's body
but the
to
people who
utilize
heard
energy
his
with
words
greater
were all
ease,
shocked.
increasing
First
one's battle
place.
strength.
Wasn't that
Poison
number
Fire
1?
King,
Are you
hiss.
afraid?
Everyone,
Blood Hand
including
King
Li
sneered.
Zhongfeng,
Poison
was
Fire
stupefied.
King almost
8
jumped
young
up
beast
as if his
lords,
tail had
4
been stepped
demons,
on.
peerless
Blood Hand
geniuses
King,
of other
what do you
continents
mean?
had all been defeated
No matter
by
how
Yi Chen.
powerful he is,
This was
he is
simply
still not
world
a life
shaking
and
news.
death king.
I'm
Changtian
merely
sect
surprised.
flared up. Moreover,
Returning to the
I
mountain
advise
peak,
you not to be
Yi
careless.
Chen immediately
He has
entered
a supreme
seclusion.
grade sword.
His cultivation giant was
Wolf
indeed
King
at
is
the
no
3rd
match for
layer
him.
of life and death
Although
chamber,
both of us are
but he had
stronger
yet
than
to
Giant
familiarize
Wolf King,
himself with
we
this
might
sudden
be injured
increase in
if we're not
strength,
careful.
and his foundation
Poison
was
Fire
not very
King
stable
had always
either.
been cautious,
He had to
and
enter
he viewed his
seclusion
own
for a
life
few
with
days
extreme
to
importance.
consolidate his current
If not for the
cultivation base.
temptation being too
7
great,
days
he wouldn't
passed in a
have rashly
flash.
come over.
Yi Chen
Rest
smoothly
assured,
exited
I won't
seclusion.
be careless no matter
The
who
3rd
I'm
layer
facing.
of life and death
Otherwise,
chamber is
Yin
indeed
Sky King
miraculous.
wouldn't have invited
I can
me.
vaguely sense
Before
the life
becoming
and
a
death
life
cycle
and death
of heaven
king,
and earth.
Blood Hand
But it's
King
very
was an
vague.
assassin.
In life
As
and
an
death
assassin,
chamber,
the
one's
most
basic
basic
requirement
requirement
was
of
not
life
to be
and
careless.
In
Even
fact,
when facing
one had
an
already
ordinary
come into
person,
contact with
one's
life
heart
Tao
had
and
to be
death
as
Tao,
calm as still
but could not
water.
grasp or use
Poison
them.
Fire King's
Dugu
mouth
Ju had
twitched.
grasped a trace
He
of
also
death
knew
Tao,
that Blood
which
Hand
allowed
King
him to
was a
advance by
frightening
leaps
person.
and bounds.
His frightening
Marquis
was
sought
not
his
his
strength,
star meteor,
but his
was
calm
also the
heart.
same.
Such
No
a
rush.
person would either not
I'll
attack
grasp both
or
life
strike
Tao
like
and
a
death
thunderbolt,
Tao.
but not
All
now.
right, let's
What
do
I
it.
need to do now
Make
is
sure to
forge
use your
upper-grade
killing
swords.
moves. Although
Poison
his
Fire
cultivation
King
base
licked
had
his
advanced
lips
by
with a
leaps and
sinister
bounds,
expression on
Yi
his
Chen
face.
would not neglect
Blood
his sword
Hand
Tao
King's eyes
cultivation
were
base.
as calm as an
The
ancient
process
well,
of forging
but his
swords
indifference
was
was
also
even
more
frightening.
process of self-reflection.
Circulating their
Unceasing
Jinyuan,
self-reflection,
the two's auras rose.
unceasing breakthroughs,
Attack,
an endless
capture.
cycle. The space
In Life
ruptured,
and Death Secret
and Poison
Realm,
Hand
the
King
news of Yi
and Blood
Chen's
Hand King
invincibility,
appeared, eventually
their auras
reaching
had
the
already
first rank
reached
of
a
life and
critical
death realm
point.
substitute list
Poison
spread
Hand
throughout
King
the 3
slightly opened
continents
his
as well
mouth,
as overseas,
faintly emitting
shocking
the
the whole
purple red
world.
radiance.
What shocked
Blood
them was
Hand
not Yi
King's
Chen's
palms turned
invincibility,
blood red like
but Yi
jade,
Chen's youth.
containing a frightening
According
power.
to the young expert who
Bewitching
brought
mirror
back the news,
shattering.
Yi
They
Chen
were
was no
fast,
more than
but
30
Yi
years
Chen
old,
was faster.
the youngest among all
Just
of
as
them.
the two moved,
Not even
before
30
they could
years
break
old,
the space,
but the
Yi
first
Chen
rank
took
of
out the
life and
Sky
death realm
Scorpio sword
substitute
and
list.
unsheathed it in an instant.
Was this another
By the
Xianhu?
time the two broke
No.
the space,
Yi Chen was
Chen's
Yi Chen,
bewitching mirror
not
shattering
anyone's
had
shadow.
already finished
His
storing up
invincibility
power.
came
With
from
a
the strength
slash
of his
boundless
opponents.
space ripples
Marquis
and
Sword
sword
Chi
chi
containing the
Marquis
profound
Sword
of
Star
space
were both
pervaded,
peerless geniuses
condensed,
in the past,
and solidified.
However,
Ua,
since they were
Poison
in the
Fire
same
King
generation
and
as Yi
Blood Hand
Chen,
King,
who
were
were sealed in the
defeated.
mirror,
As
looked
for
dazed.
who was the true first
What was
rank
going
between
on?
Yi Chen and Xu Jing,
How
there
did
was still
Yi
many
Chen know
disputes.
that someone was going
However,
to attack him?
such disputes
How did
were
he know
meaningless.
that they would attack
The two
from
were
this
lovers,
position,
and their future would
coincidence.
shock the whole world.
Even a fool would know
Elysium
that
shook
this was
the
not
whole
a
world.
coincidence.
Blood Sky
The only
continent
explanation
was
was
that Yi Chen Chen
giant
had a
wolf
soul
king
power
was
comparable
defeated.
to a life and
White
death
wolf
king.
sect's
By
supreme
relying
elder
on
giant
his
powerful
powerful
soul
king was
power,
defeated.
he was able to
The one
trace
who
their
defeated him
existence
was
and
neither
make
a life and
preparations
death
in
king nor a
advance.
beast king.
Otherwise,
But a young
there
man
was no
at the
way to
third
explain
layer
the
of life
fact
and death
that they were
chamber.
attacked as soon as they
That
came
young
out.
man was precisely the first
in
rank
less than
of
a
life and
thousandth
death
of a
realm
blink of an
substitute
eye.
list.
Poison Fire
Defeating
King and
Giant
Bloodhand
Wolf
King's
King
figures
at the third
twisted,
layer of life and
struggling
death
to break
chamber
free
was an
from the
accomplishment
restraint
that
of the
no one
frozen
had
space.
achieved in the past
However,
several tens
they
of
had
thousands of
underestimated
years.
the might of the
Perhaps
witching
Shenmue
mirror could
shattering.
also defeat
Adding
ordinary
on the
life
fact
and
that
death
they were
kings
caught
at the same
unprepared,
level with a
they
supreme
wasted a
great
lot of
artifact.
time.
But it
By
had
the
never
time they
happened.
reacted,
And
the
now,
mirror had
such a
already
thing had
shattered.
happened.
It
Yi
shattered
Chen's
into
name
millions of
thoroughly
pieces,
exploded
each
in blood
piece like a
continent.
sharp blade.
That's
Poochie,
right.
Poochie,
Indeed,
Poochie,
it exploded.
What did it feel
Blood
like
Sky
to be cut into pieces?
also had the pavilion
This
of
was
knowledge.
the feeling right now.
Perhaps
Poison
Poison
Fire
Fire
King
before
and
Yi
Bloodhand's
Chen's
name
name
spread
spread
in
in
other
Egyptian yuan
continents
was
as well,
cut open,
just
and
like
cracks
Xuanho's
appeared on
name
their
back
armors.
then. Everyone
the
knew
places
about
where
him.
they weren't wearing
Yi Chen,
defensive
are you
artifacts
sure it's
were
him?
covered in bloody
In an
scars.
underground palace,
The masks on their
blood
faces
shadows
were
were
also
standing in a
torn off,
triangle,
revealing
the
their
blood
flesh and
shadow
blood.
with the strongest
In a mere
aura
instant,
spoke to the
the
blood
two
shadow
had
with a
suffered a
curved
frightening
horn on his
blow.
head.
The blood
I'll
shadow
dismember
with a
you
curved
into
horn
1,000
nodded.
pieces.
According to the description,
Poison Fire
its
King's
80 to
roar
90%
couldn't even be
accurate.
isolated by
Eternal
the pervading
sky
space
space
power.
hasn't been destroyed
The entire
for
mountain
500
range
years,
shook,
as if
it's
this
a bit
sound wave
strange.
had the power to
Don't
destroy
touch
a
him
small
for the
mountain
time
being.
being.
After
Still
a
not
moment of
enough.
silence,
Using
the
the
leading
witching
blood
mirror
shadow
shattering
said,
to injure
"Are we
Poison
just
Fire
going to
King
let him
and
go
Bloodhound
like
King?
this?" Not
The
only did the
blood-winged
two have to
female
attract
blood
their
shadow
killing
was
moves,
puzzled,
but their bodies
Don't
had
be
also become
impulsive.
stiff.
We don't have
However,
enough tenacious
Yi Chen knew
strength
that
in
this
this
was far
world.
from enough.
In fact,
The
we've
opponents
always
had been
been
hiding
hiding
in
in
the
the
shadows,
and these injuries
once we
would
walk
quickly
out of the
recover.
darkness and
By the
stand in
time
the
they
sunlight,
recovered,
we'll
he
lose
would be
our
in
footing,
danger,
which will
fighting one
arouse the
against two.
vigilance of this
His
world's
forehead
experts.
opened, and a
Of
silver
course,
vertical
they've
eye
already
opened.
sensed our existence.
Noiselessly,
A
the
silver
leading
light
blood
beam
shadow
shot out,
said
ignoring
unhurriedly,
the pervading
"This is a
space power
huge
and
threat.
Poison Fire
Has he
King's
not
physical
grown up
defenses."
yet?"
The
Directly
female
drilling
blood
into his
shadow
sea
was
of soul.
unwilling.
Amidst
Don't
Poison
worry,
Fire
we won't
King's
let go
muffled
of those
groan,
who pose a
Yi
threat.
Chen didn't stop.
That battle
Holding
king
the
is an
Sky
example.
Scorpio sword,
However,
his figure
not
flickered,
being able to
arriving
kill
not
that
far
Xianhu
from
was a
Bloodhound
mistake
King
and an
thrusting
irreparable
out.
regret.
Autumn
Let
Water
our
Sword
representatives do the rest.
style,
Congealing
those
water,
representatives
in terms
are
of
too
pure
weak.
lethality,
Although they can be
congealing
considered
water
had
has
already
life and death
surpassed
experts in
bewitching
this
mirror
world.
shattering.
They're just the
This
lowest
was
level
because,
experts.
apart from
containing
the
metal
the leading
profound
blood
and
shadow
water
chuckled,
profound,
we
it
can't
also
control
contained
a
the
powerful
death Dao.
expert like
As the
Xianhu.
sword stabbed out,
Being weak,
the crisis
also
of
has
death
its advantages.
enveloped Bloodhound King.
It's not easy to
Bloodhound
arouse
King
suspicion.
was, after all,
Should we
an
let the
assassin,
representatives
be it
kill
his
him
mental
now?
endurance
The blood
or reaction
shadow with a
speed,
curved
he
horn
was a bit
asked,
faster than
faintly
Poison Fire
shaking
King.
her head.
At
The
the moment
leading
of
blood
imminent
shadow
peril,
said, "Don't
he
lose
crossed his
patience.
arms in front of his
I don't
forehead.
want to make another
Rip.
mistake."
Moreover,
The Sky
we still have the
Scorpio
most
sword
important
pierced
thing to
through
do,
Bloodhound
which is
King's
to unseal
crossed
Lord
arms,
Curse
only
and
missing
Lord
an
Terror.
inch.
After
Pang.
unsealing
A rain
them,
of light
we won't
sprinkled
need to
down,
hide in the
and
darkness
Bloodhound
anymore.
King's arms
We can
turned into
breathe the
purple
air of
crystals,
this world
thoroughly
openly.
shattering.
We've
Apart
persevered
from
for
this,
countless
a
years,
power of
but those
extermination
seals
are
spread
too
through
strong.
his arms
The
and into
female
his
blood
body.
shadow was
It's
a bit
death
tired.
Dao. Bloodhound
rush.
King didn't
At the
reveal a
slowest,
trace of pain
it'll
on
take
his
100
face,
years.
as if the shattered
At the
arms weren't
fastest,
his.
it'll be
However,
unsealed in a
he was
few
somewhat
decades.
astonished by the death Dao
The leading
contained in
blood
Yi Chen's
shadow
sword.
was also somewhat
This was
silent.
far more profound than the death Dao
the
he
blood
had
shadow
comprehended
with a
when he
curved horn
first entered
spoke.
life and
Perhaps
death
we
realm.
don't need to do
If Yi
anything.
Chen comprehended
this world,
half of the death
he has
Dao and
offended
life
many
Dao,
powers.
he would be able
He
to
was
enter life
referring
and
to
death
Yi
realm
Chen,
and become a true
the
king.
female blood shadow
However,
disdainfully
death
said,
Dao isn't
"This
enough
world
to deal
will
with
never
it."
be united.
An even more powerful
Wrong.
death
You're all
chi
wrong.
erupted from
The
Bloodhound
blood
King's
shadow
body,
in the lead
instantly
solemnly said,
dispersing Yi
"If this
Chen's
world
death
is
chi.
peaceful, that
What
would
a
be our
pity.
fortune."
The moment
Experts
Bloodhound
are
King
tempered
crossed
through
his arms
slaughter.
and blocked the
It's
sword,
just like
Yi
raising
Chen knew
bugs.
that he had lost
The
the best
strong will
opportunity
devour the
to kill
weak,
him,
and the
as
last
a life
strong
and
will be
death
able to
king.
make up
It was
for all the
impossible
weak
for
before
him
them.
to not have
All right,
comprehended death
horned
Dao.
devil.
If
Continue
this sword had
observing
pierced
that human
human
youngster.
King's vitals,
Don't
Yi
act
Chen was
blindly
confident
without
that
thinking.
the combination of
Yes,
death Dao and
the blood
congealing
shadow
water
with
would
a
have
curved
left
horn
Bloodhound
nodded.
King on the verge
Meeting
of death.
dismiss.
Seeing that
The
his
leading
sword
blood
strike had
shadow
no
effect,
effect, Yi Chen
seeming to have
hastily
lost
retreated
all of its
and
power.
released his powerful
Dang,
sword
dang,
domain,
dang.
suppressing
The
the
sound of
surrounding
iron
spatial
hammers
power
striking
and making
metal
the might
rang
of the
out
sword domain
incessantly.
even more frightening.
This was an underground
Go.
flame cave,
Thousands of
and a
cyan-colored
fiery aura
swords
surged.
condensed and
A
shot
young man
toward
was
Poison
holding an
Fire
iron
King
hammer,
and Bloodhound
striking
King.
the sword
It was
embryo
as if
on top of the
10,000
furnace.
arrows had been
As
shot
the
at
iron
the same
hammer
time.
struck,
The sword embryo
intensity
became
was
sharper
indescribable.
and more aggressive.
Bloodhound
For a
King's
whole month,
shattered
Yi
arms
Chen
rapidly
had been
grew back,
crafting top
and the
rank
wounds
swords.
on his body also
He could feel
healed.
that crafting
Bloodhound
swords was
King's
also a kind of
emotionless
training,
eyes
a
fixated
kind
on
of
Yi
training
Chen,
that would
a
allow him
trace
to
of
accumulate
apprehension
a lot
in the
of
depths of his
experience.
pupils.
After
As
who
an
knew how
assassin,
many times,
what he feared
Yi
the
Chen's
most were
mind
those
was
whose
his minds
minds
were as calm
calm as
He
an
raised
ancient
the
well,
iron hammer
able
high,
to display
and
their
his body
strength to the
emitted
limit,
an immortal
or even
power
surpass
as he
it.
hammered down.
Without a
Down.
doubt,
This
Yi
hammering
Cheng was this
sound
kind of
lasted
person.
for a long time.
From the moment they
The
were
sound
restrained,
seemed to
the
contain
opponent's attacks
immortality,
came one
never
after another,
dissipating.
each of them
The
extremely
unfinished
dangerous.
sword below emitted
As
an
long as they
immortal
were the
power that
slightest
far
bit
surpassed
careless,
any of the
the
swords
consequences
that Yi Chen
would
had
be
forged.
unimaginable.
Once it was
hard
completed,
to imagine
its
how Yi
power
Chen
could
could
be
come up
imagined.
with such a
Rank
meticulous
5
plan in
immortal
such a
sword
short
soul,
time.
finally
Clang,
completed.
clang. Putting
The
down the
protective
iron hammer
genuine of a
Yi
life
Chen's
and
death
death
king
showed a
was
faint
extremely
understanding.
sturdy.
Immortal,
The thousands of
what
swords
was
were all
immortal?
bounced off.
In
and
fact,
each spark
immortality
could melt a large
was
amount
just a
of
kind of
mountain
spirit.
rocks.
I
It
made a
wasn't
mistake.
concrete existence.
I should have targeted
as the
someone
rank
else.
5 immortal sword
Bloodhound
soul formed,
King's mental
the destruction
fortitude
sword
and
soul
reaction
in Yi
speed
Chen's mind
astonished Yi
trembled.
Chen.
The
On
two
the other
great
hand,
sword souls
the other
were at the
person was
same
much
rank,
worse in this
finally
aspect,
resonating
only
with
at
each
the
other,
level
the
of an
resonance
ordinary
of
life and
destruction
death
and
king.
immortality.
Of course,
Under this
couldn't
resonance,
be blamed
Yi
on Yi
Chen's
Chen.
cultivation base
Yi Chen
suddenly
hadn't
reached
studied
perfection,
these two's
reaching the
characters.
peak of the third layer of life and death
If he
chamber.
had,
he wouldn't have chosen this person as his
Chapter
first target.
875.
Puff.
Once
A silver
he
light
reached the
shot
peak
out
of the
as
third
Yi Chen
level,
unleashed
all
a
of Yi
soul
Chen's
light
flesh
of
and
Bloodhound
blood had
King.
combined with his
Under the
Zhen Yuan.
suppression of Sword
His
Domain,
meridians
no
contained
matter
Zhen
how
Yuan,
fast Bloodhound
his
King's
blood
reaction
contained
speed
Zhen Yuan,
was,
his
his
skin
body
contained
couldn't
Zhen
keep
Yuan,
up. And even his
therefore,
internal
the
organs
soul light
contained Zhen
charged
Yuan.
into his sea of soul.
Besides his bones,
His face
his whole
slightly
body
pale,
was like a super
Bloodhound
sponge,
King's
and his
expression
Zhen
was
Yuan
somewhat
was like
absent-minded,
water, which could be
the soul
absorbed by the
membrane of a
sponge.
life and death
As for the
king was
Dantian,
extremely powerful,
it still had an
but Yi Chen's
irreplaceable
innate
function.
ability,
Soul
it was
light,
the source
was
of
also
power
not to
and
be
one of the cause of
underestimated.
the human body.
Under the impact
I
of
can
the soul
almost
light,
reach the
the
first
membrane
layer
trembled,
of the undying
and his
body.
soul felt
Broken
dizzy.
limb rebirth.
Kill.
Although
Since
Bloodhound
Bloodhound
had
King was his
fused with the
first
flesh
target,
and blood,
Yi
to
Chen
reach the
wouldn't
realm
change
of
his
broken
mind.
limb rebirth.
Moreover,
He still had to
it would
fuse
be
the Zhen
difficult
Yuan
for him
into
to
the
use
bones.
soul light a third
After
time.
all, there were
If
many
not for
bones
his
in the
immortal
human
sword
body.
soul reaching
If
the
the
fifth
flesh and
step
blood
and
were cut
resonating
off,
with the
it
fifth
could
step
be
destruction
recovered.
sword
But
soul,
what about the
his soul
bones?
power would have
He
been
couldn't just
completely
recover the
depleted,
flesh and
and his
blood without
condition
the
would have
bones,
dropped to a
right?
frightening level.
Wouldn't that
And
make
now,
him a soft
the soul
caterpillar
power
in his sea of
fusing
soul
the
was
Zhen
less than a
Yuan
tenth
into
of
the
what it
bones
used to
was
be,
not a difficult
and it was at a
process for
dangerous
Yi
level.
Chen.
Like
He had
a
already
sword light,
touched the
Yi
threshold
Chen
of
shot
broken
straight
limb
at Bloodhound King,
but his
the
foundation was
existence
still
of Sword
lacking.
Domain made
Time
his
flew
speed
by,
even
and in
faster
a mere
and
7
harder to
days,
capture.
Yi Chen
In an
succeeded.
instant, the
From
distance
now on,
between him
he
and
also
Bloodhound
possessed the
King was
ability
less than
of
10
broken limb
meters.
rebirth.
A sword
He only
pierced
needed
out,
to consume Zhen
congealing
Yuan,
water,
and he didn't need
Kid,
to eat Yuan
Dai
Chi
Chi,
or
Poison
Xiantian Yuan
Fire
Chi
King
pills
had
anymore.
already recovered
After
from the
entering the
dizziness.
life and death
While
realm,
using his
the undying
protective
body
Zhen
can
Yuan
at
to
most
resist
reach
the
the early
myriad
broken
swords,
limb
he
rebirth
slightly
realm.
opened his mouth,
After entering
and a
the
purple
life
red
and
light
death realm at
flickered
the
before
peak of the
shooting
third
out.
layer, the
Fused
undying
profound
body can reach
martial
the peak
skill,
broken
poison
limb
fire
rebirth realm,
explosion,
which is only
I
a
have
step
to
away
kill
from
him.
flesh
Yi
derivation.
Chen's face
I've
was
already
filled with
reached
killing
the
intent
early
as he
broken limb
completely
rebirth
disregarded
realm.
Poison
Once I
Fire
enter the
King's
life and
frightening
death
attack.
realm, my
His
undying
sword
body
pierced
will at least
Bloodhound
reach
King's
the
forehead,
early flesh
and a burst
derivation
of
realm.
energy
The
combined with
difference
death chi
between the
exploded
realms
in
of entering
Bloodhound
the
King's
life and
head.
death realm was
Pang.
huge.
Bloodhound
High-step,
King's
half-step
head
kings who
his
entered the
life
life
force
and death
gone.
realm were the
In the
most
next
ordinary
moment,
life and
Poison
death realm
Fire
kings.
King's attack also
However,
landed on Yi
those who
Chen's
entered
body,
the life and death
creating a
realm
violent
at the peak of the
explosion.
third layer
The
had great
purple-red
potential.
flame was not only
As long as
scorching
their
hot,
cultivation
but
base
also
kept up,
contained intense
they would be
fire
able to
poison.
make rapid progress. Someone like Yi Chen, who had the
Chapter
broken limb rebirth
878.
ability even before
The location
entering
of
the
the
life and
battle
death
was
realm,
thousands of
was
miles away
extremely
from the
rare.
main peak of
Among the
Zhongtian
same
Martial
realm,
School.
only the
But
young
everyone in the
undying
school
demon
could feel
lord could
waves
do
of
it.
horrifying power
Suddenly,
being
Yi
transmitted
Chen
through the
smiled
air.
bitterly.
The howling
Before
wind
he
had
reached
even
the
blown
realm
down
of
the
limb
tree
regrowth,
growth on the surrounding
the
mountains.
true essence in his
Uprooting
body
the
was very
flowers and
abundant
grasses
and could not be
and then
increased.
turning them into dust.
Now, there was
This
only
is
a little
battle
bit of
between
true
kings.
essence left in
Li
his body.
Zhongfeng's
Of
pupils
course,
shrank as
this
he
did
muttered.
not mean that the
Sect
true
leader,
essence had
is Elder
disappeared
Yi
into thin air.
cultivating in the core of the mountain
it was
range?
devoured by the
Us.
cells.
True
Gao
essence
Jiuan's
and the
face
body
was
became
filled with
one,
worry,
and there was no
what can we
distinction
do?
between the two.
The great elder
Although
smiled
it was said
bitterly.
that way,
A
it
casual
was still
attack
the
from a
body
life
that
and
took the
death
lead.
king can annihilate the entire
Once
sect.
the battle was
We can
extremely
only pray
fierce
that
and the
Elder Yi can
consumption of
turn
true
misfortune
essence was
into
too
fortune
fast.
and
He could
repel the
squeeze it
invading
out of his
kings.
cells.
The news
This
of
was
Yi
because
Chen
the heavily
fusion was
injuring
still in
giant
the initial
wolf king
stage.
had long since
There was
reached
still the
eternal
middle
sky
stage of
sect.
broken limb rebirth.
Everyone in
The
eternal
late
sky
stage
sect
was
peak,
filled with
the early
reverence for Yi
stage of
Chen,
flesh derivation,
regarding him
the
as
middle
an existence
stage,
comparable
the late
to
stage,
ordinary
and
kings.
the peak, even the
Bang.
blood rebirth
All
realm.
of a sudden,
No wonder
the earth
young
shook,
undying
and a
demon
lot of
lords
buildings
Yuan
on the main
is several
peak of the
times
school
denser
collapsed.
than a peak third
In the
layer
next
life and
moment,
death chamber
a
human
huge
at the
purple
same
red
level.
fireball rose
Once he
1,000
reaches
li
the
away.
broken limb
Even
regrowth
from
realm,
1,000
he
li
can
away,
hold even more
it
Zhen
seemed as
Yuan
if it
and
was
increase
right in
his
front of
cultivation
one's
base
eyes.
even faster.
Swish. At the
As
sea
the
of
fireballs
souls
rose,
rose,
only
only
the
the
Dantian
tore
could
through the
store
sky
Zhen Yuan,
and pierced through
and
the main
meridians
peak's
were
main
only
hall,
the channels.
leaving a pitch
At
black
the
hole in the
half-step King
ground.
warrior level,
What's
the
this?
blood could also
Everybody
store Zhen
was startled,
and at the life and
it
death
looks like a
challenge realm,
sword.
the flesh
Li
could also
Zhongfeng's
store
heart
Jin Yuan.
skipped a beat.
Right now,
making
Yi
a prompt
Chen's entire
decision.
body could
He
store
slammed
Jin
his
Yuan
palm
on the ground,
and the Jin Yuan he had before was
the beam of
obviously
light
not
flew
enough.
out, revealing a
Fortunately,
sword sheath.
I have a lot of
Its
Jin
elder
Yuan
Yi's
crystals.
sword sheath.
Yi Chen
Someone
smiled and
recognized
sat
it.
cross-legged on the
The
ground,
evil vanquishing
starting to
sword at
refine
Yi
the Jin
Chen's
Yuan
waist
crystals.
was something everyone had seen many times.
1,000.
Holding the sword sheath,
10,000.
Li Zhongfeng's
50,000.
expression became even more
After
worried.
consuming 50,000
This
Jin
battle was
Yuan
definitely
crystals,
better than the
Yi Chen
one with
finally
Giant
felt
Wolf
full
King.
and could no longer
Otherwise,
refine Jin
the
Yuan.
sword sheath wouldn't
At
have
this
flown
moment,
out.
his Jin
As the
Yuan was
fireball
3
rose,
times denser than
Poison
before.
Fire King was
He was not
incomparably
inferior
happy.
to young
The
undying
Poison Fire
demon Lord at
Explosion
all.
was one of his
The
most
Sky
powerful
Scorpio
ace
sword
attacks.
could also be used
Not to
15
mention a
times
little
in a
guy
row,
at the peak
nearing
of the third
20
layer
times.
of life and death
The
challenge.
evil shattering
Even
sword
life
could
and
be
death
used
realm
at
warriors
will.
at the same
What
level
a
would not
frightening
dare
power.
to use their bodies
His
to
whole
resist
body
it.
was brimming with
He
power.
was sure that
A
Yi
feeling
Chen would
that not
die
everyone
without a
could
complete
experience.
corpse. At
What
this
a
moment,
pity for
Yi
Bloodhound
Chen felt
King.
that even his
Poison
fingernails
Fire King
contained
could
a
not
frightening
understand
power
why
that could
Yi
easily
Chen would
tear
risk his
apart
life
steel
to
and
kill
artifacts.
Bloodhound King. Of course,
the fireball
Yi
gradually
Chen was
shrank,
also clear
its
that
color
his battle
changing
power
from
had not
purplish red
increased
to
by
dark
much,
red,
because
then
the
from dark
purity of
red
his
to orange
genuine
red.
had not increased.
Then, with a
It was
puff,
merely
it
3
dissipated
times
into
denser than
nothingness,
before,
as if it had
One
never
day later,
existed.
the
Only
unfinished
the huge
upper-grade
crater
sword
and
was
lava
completed.
on the ground
The
could
color
prove
of
the
this sword
authenticity
was
of
pure
what had
gold,
just happened,
as if it was forged
impossible.
from gold.
Poison
It was the
Fire
supreme
King's
upper-grade
expression
sword,
changed.
the only
He
supreme
saw Yi
upper-grade
Chen.
sword Yi Chen
Yi
had ever
Chen was
forged.
wielding 2 swords.
Although it was only
in the
upper-grade,
air,
its
Yi
power
Chen's
was
appearance
comparable to
could
a
only
peak
be described
semi-extreme
as
grade
miserable.
artifact, which was equivalent to a
His 2
pseudo-extreme
swords were
grade
crisscrossed
artifact.
between his head
Because
and
of the
chest.
frightening immortal
Apart from
sword
his head
intent
and torso,
contained within,
the rest of
it
his
was
body
roughly
was
peak
scorched
third
black.
step.
When
His
used
legs
by
were
Yi
even
Chen,
missing.
it did not
From
have
the
much of an
outside,
effect.
the 2 arms
However,
holding the
if it
evil
was used
vanquishing
by another
sword and
sword
Sky
artist,
Scorpio sword,
the effect
looked
would
no
be
different
huge.
from charcoal.
With a peak
Indistinctly
third
immortal sword
crackling
intent,
sounds
it
could
would
be
be more
heard
than
coming
enough
from
to
within
defeat
his arms.
even more powerful
The
opponents.
instant he killed
Merely
Bloodhound King,
upper-grade,
Yi Chen
not
immediately
immortal yet.
switched from
I'll
offense to
call you
defense.
100 eras.
The destruction
100
sword
eras
intent
meant
was
100
replaced by the
eras,
immortal
which
sword
meant
intent.
10,000 years.
Immortal sword intent focused
Because of
on
the immortal
suppression
sword
and
intent,
defense.
this
Even
sword
so,
could be preserved
he could
for at
only
least
protect the
10,000
most
years
important
without any
parts of his
damage.
body.
If a
His
family
legs were
under 50
directly
grade
burnt
could
to
obtain
ashes,
it,
and
it would
even
be
the
a
evil
great
vanquishing
sword.
sword's sheath
Catcher.
was sent
Very
flying to God
easily,
knows where.
Yi Chen used the
Whoosh.
100 eras
All of a
sword
sudden,
to cut down
Yi
another
Chen's
upper-grade
arms turned
sword.
into 2
His
balls of
cultivation
fire,
base had
burning
reached
into
perfection,
nothingness.
and his
Losing
immortal
control
sword
of the
soul
2
had
swords,
reached the 5th
the evil
step.
vanquishing sword
Resonating
and
Sky
with the 5th
Scorpio
step
sword
destruction
fell down,
sword soul,
along with the
Yi
storage
Chen's
ring.
strength rose
It's
by a
mine.
large margin.
Poison Fire
Next,
King's
Yi
attention
Chen
shifted
slowed
to
down
the
the forging of
Scorpio
upper-grade
sword,
swords
and
and
began
began
to
to comprehend
comprehend
the
the
undying
undying
Tao.
Tao.
With
Sword
a soul
snake
power
art,
5 times
yin,
that of ordinary
yin,
people
the
and a
evil
cultivation
vanquishing
base
sword
at the peak
and
of the
Sky
3rd
Scorpio
layer,
sword
Yi
faintly
Chen's
trembled,
progress would be
each
enormous
turning
as
into
long as
30
he focused on
sword
something.
phantoms.
In
A
merely
total
10
of
days,
66
Yi
sword
Chen
phantoms
comprehended a
formed
trace
2
of
sword
death
phantoms
Tao,
flickering
too
with cold
vague.
light.
No
Twisting
wonder
toward
only the
Poison
strongest
Fire King.
attacks could contain
Poison
a trace
Fire
of
King
death
managed
Tao
to
in the
block
early
the evil
stages.
vanquishing sword,
Marquis
but not the
Swordstar's
Sky
Scorpio
Scorpio
and
sword.
Dugu Ju's
His
despair
arms and
killing
legs
blade
were
were
shredded
strongest
into
bloody
defensive
mist.
moves.
However,
Fortunately, their
at the
ordinary
crucial
moments didn't
he
contain
spat
the
out a
Tao of
flame
death
from his
because
mouth,
they didn't have a
repelling
deep
the sword
comprehension
image
of it.
aimed at his head.
Of course,
Sky
entering
Scorpio
life
sword
and death
and evil
realm didn't
vanquishing
require
sword
one to
flew back,
comprehend both
hovering
life
above
and
Yi
death
Chen's
Tao.
head.
Even
Flesh
life and
and
death
blood
kings
squirmed,
couldn't accomplish
bones
such a
sprouted,
feat
as long
and
as one
Yi Chen's
comprehended a
arms and
small
legs grew
part of
back.
life and death Tao
Raising
and
his
verified
right hand,
them,
they
the
would be able
storage
to
ring
enter life and death
automatically
realm.
appeared on his finger.
Swish.
With a
Holding
flicker
the
of
evil
light,
vanquishing
Yi Chen
sword,
changed
Yi
into a
Chen
new
slashed
set of
out,
blue clothes,
completely restraining
limb
the
rebirth
sword
energy.
Poison
It was
Fire
precisely
King
the
couldn't
second
control his
style
shock
of
and
autumn
blurted
water sword
out.
arts.
Congealing
Sky
water.
King.
The
You
reason
didn't
why
even
bewitching
find out
mirror
such
shattering
important
was so
information
powerful was because
Poison
of its
Fire
space
King
profound.
hated Yin Sky
However,
King to the bone.
Death Tao
Yi
required
Chen
pure
was indeed
destructive
not a
power.
life and death king.
Therefore,
but his soul
congealing
power was
water
comparable
was more
to a life and
suitable.
death king's.
Wrong.
Moreover,
Yi Chen shook his
he had
head and
comprehended
sheathed
death
his sword,
Tao,
and
pondering
even
with
limb
his brows
rebirth.
creased. If they continued
Swish.
fighting,
Another
he
sword
didn't know
slash
what
was
new
sent
ability
out.
Yi Chen would
Still
use.
wrong.
Blackwater
However,
Alliance
thinking about
headquarters,
it,
on a
Poison
huge
Fire
black
King
island,
felt that he
in the
couldn't
palace
blame
at the
Yin
center
Sky
of the
King.
island,
These
Blood Sky
abilities of Yi
continents Yi
Chen
Chen
were
and true
extremely
spirit
powerful,
continents Yi
and he
Chen are
wouldn't
actually the
casually
same
reveal
person.
them.
On the
Thus,
throne,
Yin
the
Sky
black-robed
King's failure
man's
to
fingers
find out
wrapped
was
on the
quite
black
normal.
golden armrest,
Activating
Teacher,
undying body.
he hasn't become
Poison
a life
Fire
and
King's
death king
forelimbs
yet,
grew back,
so we still have
and
a
he
chance.
also changed into a
Once
new
he
set of
enters
clothes.
life and death
Yi
realm,
Chen
will be in
seems
danger.
like we've all
Wang Tai
underestimated
said
you.
from below.
Poison Fire
Wang
King
Tai
looked at
wasn't
Yi
a
Chen
person
with
of true spirit
apprehension.
continent.
Who are you?
So it took him more
Yi
than a
Chen
month to
asked.
return to Blackwater
He had always been
Alliance.
concealing
I
his
know.
abilities.
I'm apprehensive of Dragon
He
King
wouldn't
and
reveal
Shenhu,
all of his trump
the
cards
black-robed
until the
man
critical
raised his
moment.
head.
Just
Dragon
like in the
King and
secret
Shenhu
realm,
are
he
in
didn't
true
reveal
spirit
bewitching
continent.
mirror shattering.
Distant water
knew
can't
that
put
if he
out a
didn't pay
nearby
attention
fire.
to these details,
Moreover,
it would
they
be too
wouldn't dare
late
to
for
confront
our
our
entire Blackwater Alliance.
Who I am is
Wang
not
Tai
important.
didn't put Dragon
What's
King
important
and
is
Shenhu
that
in
today,
his eyes.
you'll die without a
Blackwater
doubt.
Alliance was a huge
Poison Fire
alliance with
King
numerous
didn't
life
believe
and
that
death
he
kings,
wasn't injured at
and there
all.
was no lack of
Apart
powerful
from
ones.
pure killing power,
His poison fire explosion also contained intense fire poison. This fire poison was like maggots in one's bones, extremely difficult to remove. Once it attacked the heart, even a peak life and death king would find it hard to save him. Is that so? As he spoke, Yi Chen took out a white fruit from his storage ring. This was the fruit of life and death secret realm, containing a large amount of life chi. Just as Poison Fire King had expected, his body was indeed filled with fire poison that was difficult to remove. This fire poison was constantly devouring his life force and attacking his heart. Chewing the fruit of life, it turned into life liquid and entered his internal organs, replenishing his lost life force. Yi Chen let out a breath. For the time being, His life was no longer in danger. With your Zhen Yuan, using Undying Body should consume a lot of energy, right? Thinking of something, Poison Fire King grinned. Try it and you'll know. Activating his soul power, the Sky Scorpio Sword and Evil Vanquishing Sword landed in Yi Chen's hands. Fine, I'll give it a try. Poison Fire Explosion. Poison Fire King was extremely sinister. Opening his mouth, he spat out a killing move. A purplish-red flame pillar shot out, causing the space to boil and bubble. Extinguish. Yi Chen raised the Sky Scorpio Sword and slashed. Buzz. The space distorted and solidified, sealing the purplish-red flame pillar and shattering it into thousands of pieces. Let's see how long you can last. Poison Fire King clearly wanted to exhaust Yi Chen's Zhen Yuan. Opening his mouth, he spat out purplish-red flame pillar after purplish-red flame pillar, bombarding Yi Chen from several li away. He didn't dare to get too close to Yi Chen. Yi Chen's soul light left a lingering fear in his heart. Bloodhand King had also been struck by the soul light, causing his soul to feel dizzy. Otherwise, with Yi Chen's strength, how could he have instantly killed Bloodhand King? Yi Chen's soul light was simply not inferior to a heaven-grade high-step soul secret art at great completion. Yi Chen coldly snorted. Poison Fire King thought he didn't have much Zhen Yuan left, but in fact, he still had 60 to 70% of it. Recovering the Undying Body only used 30%. However, this didn't mean he could use it as he pleased. The fire poison didn't seem to be able to threaten Yi Chen at the moment, but it still held back half of his Zhen Yuan. Otherwise, without the suppression of Zhen Yuan, the fire poison would attack his heart, and he wouldn't even need Poison Fire King to kill him. Congealing Water. Switching to the Evil Vanquishing Sword, Yi Chen stabbed out with the Sky Scorpio Sword in his right hand. A purple water-like sword energy pierced through the void and attacked Poison Fire King. Poison Fire King jumped in fright. Multitasking. Perfect multitasking? Multitasking was something many people could accomplish, but to perfectly multitask like Yi Chen, executing different moves with both hands at the same time, was something few could accomplish. Even Poison Fire King admitted that he couldn't do it. Poison Fire Barrier. His left hand drew a semicircle, condensing an arc-shaped purple barrier in front of Poison Fire King. Peng. The water-like sword energy struck the purple barrier, causing circular ripples. With a muffled groan, Poison Fire King took several steps back. The poison fire flame explosion he was about to prepare was stopped. Now's the time. Yi Chen rapidly approached. With the bewitching mirror shattering in his left hand and congealing water in his right, it was as if he had turned into two people, fiercely attacking Poison Fire King. Peng 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 peng. Poison Fire King retreated again and again, blood trickling down the corner of his mouth. How much Zhen Yuan does this kid have? Why hasn't the fire poison in his body erupted? Poison Fire King gradually thought of retreating. He had been underestimating Yi Chen all along. When Yi Chen didn't act as he expected, he lost confidence. Retreat. The space suddenly exploded as Poison Fire King tried to escape into the void. Bewitching mirror shattering. Condense for me. Steam rose from Yi Chen's body as he used the bewitching mirror shattering with the Sky Scorpio Sword. A hilarious scene unfolded. The Poison Fire King was stuck in the spatial barrier. Half of his body was outside, while the other half was in the void. He looked miserable. Spatial shattering. Poison Fire King's exposed body shattered into thousands of pieces, filling the sky with a purple rain of light. Yi Chen, you're dead. I will take revenge. From the depths of the void, Poison Fire King's crazed roar resounded. Yi Chen didn't care about Poison Fire King's words. He spurted out a mouthful of purple-red blood. There wasn't a trace of vitality in it, only fire poison. In fact, he was already at the end of his rope at this point. Just now, he had drawn out a portion of the Zhen Yuan he used to suppress the fire poison and used the bewitching mirror shattering. However, the fire poison had immediately counterattacked, forcing his Zhen Yuan to retreat. If Poison Fire King had persisted for a while longer, the one to die would have been Yi Chen. Unfortunately, the opponent had been scared off. Chapter 879. This fire poison is indeed troublesome. Taking out a large amount of Jinyuan crystals, Yi Chen focused on refining them as he closed his eyes. In the evening, the sun set below the mountain, and the sky darkened. Yi Chen opened his eyes and slowly let out a mouthful of fire poison qi. My Jinyuan has completely recovered. But it will not be easy to get rid of the fire poison. Yi Chen could feel that although the fire poison in his body had been suppressed by the boundless Jinyuan, it was still very tenacious. It was like maggots in one's bones, slowly eating away at his flesh and bones. Although he had already trained to the realm of regrowing broken limbs, it only applied to the limbs. If the injuries on the main body were fatal, it would still be extremely dangerous. Whatever, I won't be able to get rid of the fire poison in a short period of time. But it should be fine after a while. Yi Chen did not think much of this fire poison. He was not a normal person, and his body was not ordinary either. A mere fire poison would not be able to kill him. Turning his head, Yi Chen saw a lot of people. Almost all of the upper echelons of the school had arrived. Elder Yi. Seeing Yi Chen wake up, Li Zhongfeng let out a sigh of relief. Yi Chen faintly nodded, I've made you guys worry. Elder Yi, you're being too polite. Elder Yi's misfortune turned into fortune is our school's fortune. Oh right, I wonder who the Life and Death King was. Was it because of our school? Once the battle ended, Li Zhongfeng and the others immediately rushed over. However, Yi Chen was recovering his Jinyuan, so they waited beside him without disturbing him. Yi Chen shook his head, I'm not sure either, but it most likely has nothing to do with the school. This was purely his intuition. Alright, I'm going to close up and heal. If there is nothing, don't disturb me. The fire poison remaining in his body was more or less a problem, dragging down a lot of his Jinyuan. Shoo. With a flicker, Yi Chen flew toward his elder's mountain. Inside the secret room under the great elder's palace, Yi Chen sat on a stone platform with his legs crossed and a storage ring in his hand. I wonder how much wealth a Life and Death King has. After killing Bloodhand King, Yi Chen obtained Bloodhand King's storage ring, armor, and gloves. The armor was a peak semi-supreme grade armor, and the gloves were a bit better, pseudo-supreme grade. Life and Death Kings were divided into different levels. Without a doubt, be it Giant Wolf King, Poison Fire King, or Bloodhand King, they were all ordinary Life and Death Kings. Their strength was not too high, and it was quite normal for them not to have supreme grade artifacts. Not everyone had the same fortune as Yi Chen. Relying on his powerful soul power, Yi Chen erased Bloodhand King's soul imprint on the ring and sent his soul power inside. Bloodhand King's wealth was quite average. There were more than 30,000 top-grade spirit stones. More than 50 million high-grade spirit stones. There were 3 kinds of supreme-grade materials, the most common supreme-grade metal, star iron, 30 supreme-grade fire cloud stones, and 13 supreme-grade ice stones. Star iron was the most common material for forging supreme-grade artifacts. For example, Yi Chen had Death Chi iron. However, it was only a small piece, and it wasn't enough to forge a supreme-grade sword. Therefore, he needed to add other metals, and star iron was undoubtedly the most suitable. Although this metal was common, its compatibility was very high. It wouldn't be repelled by other metals, nor would it repel other metals. The amount of star iron in Bloodhand King's storage ring was several tens of thousands of jin, but it was extremely small, only half the size of a human head. On the other hand, among the 3 supreme-grade materials Yi Chen had bought in Gemstone Islands, there was also a fist-sized chunk of star iron. Adding the 2 together, it was more or less enough to forge a supreme-grade sword. As for fire cloud stone and ice stone, they were also good materials for forging supreme-grade artifacts. Fire cloud stone could turn the artifact's attribute into fire, while ice stone could turn the artifact into ice. Both were very rare. The other 2 supreme-grade materials Yi Chen had obtained from Gemstone Islands were an egg-sized beehive iron and a finger-sized red copper. Altogether, Yi Chen had 5 supreme-grade materials. Apart from this, Bloodhand King's storage ring also contained a large amount of upper-grade and semi-supreme-grade materials. This is great. I won't lack materials to forge upper-grade and semi-supreme-grade swords. Although Yi Chen had bought a lot of upper-grade and semi-supreme grade materials, they couldn't keep up with his consumption. If he wanted to learn upper-grade sword forging art to perfection, this amount of materials was clearly insufficient, not to mention semi-supreme grade sword forging art. Yi Chen's storage ring was an upper-grade storage ring, even better than Bloodhand King's. After storing all of Bloodhand King's belongings into his own ring, Yi Chen began to take inventory. Spirit stones. Supreme grade spirit stones, 50,000 in total. Upper grade spirit stones, more than 160 million. 5 supreme grade materials: star iron, beehive iron, red copper, fire cloudstone, and ice stone. Other precious items were 2 million Jin Yuan crystals, a 3,000-year-old upper-grade fire pear tree, and a number of soul stones. These were the most precious items, and even life and death kings might not necessarily have them. Apart from these, Yi Chen's storage ring still contained all sorts of items. Upper-grade materials, upper-grade spirit grasses, artifacts of various grades. Bloodhand King's wealth wasn't that great, but it was easy to understand. At Life and Death Realm, the most important thing was to raise one's cultivation base. If one had something good, they would exchange it with others or buy it with supreme grade spirit stones. It could be said that the cultivation base of a Life and Death King was a huge fortune in itself. Unfortunately, this fortune had already been digested by him. Faintly letting out a breath, Yi Chen's attention shifted from the storage ring. It's time to expel the fire poison. As long as the fire poison wasn't expelled, it would be a disaster. Yi Chen didn't want to have to divide his Jin Yuan to suppress the fire poison while fighting others. Circulating green lotus sword arts, Yi Chen's entire body glowed with a green radiance. This was the sign of Jin Yuan and his body fusing, a sign of activating a cultivation technique. From head to toe, there wasn't a single part of his body that didn't contain Jin Yuan. Under his inner vision, Yi Chen slightly creased his brows. This fire poison had actually occupied a part of his body. Within the range of the fire poison, all of his cells had been contaminated, turning them into the base of the fire poison. The vitality and Jin Yuan in his cells had also become the nourishment of the fire poison, strengthening its power. Raising his inner vision to the limit, Yi Chen couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The fire poison seemed to be suppressed by his boundless Jin Yuan, but what made his scalp go numb was that any Jin Yuan that came in contact with the fire poison was being transformed into fire poison. This process was very minute, so minute that it was almost undetectable. Seems like I've underestimated the fire poison's harmfulness. Yi Chen thought for a bit, then took out a few ice-attributed upper-grade spirit plants from his storage ring, chewed them up, and swallowed them. The ice-cold spirit liquid slowly spread to his 5 viscera and 6 bowels, his limbs, and hundreds of meridians. Only the fire poison was excluded. Fortunately, with the effect of the ice-cold spirit liquid, the fire poison's devouring of Jin Yuan and life force slowed down. Seeing this, Yi Chen swallowed dozens of ice-attributed upper-grade spirit plants, causing his body to cool down. His body temperature dropped to below a normal person's, just like a block of ice. There are no more ice-attributed upper-grade spirit plants. I'm afraid it will be hard to suppress. Only now did Yi Chen pay attention to the fire poison. This fire poison was vastly different from the ordinary ones. Right, let's see if the extreme grade ice stone will work. Yi Chen didn't dare to swallow the ice stone, but he could wear it on his body to affect the fire poison. So cold. Holding the ice stone in his hand was fine, since he could use Jin Yuan to resist the low temperature. However, Yi Chen needed the ice stone to suppress the fire poison, so he naturally wouldn't use Jin Yuan to repel it. The surface of his skin was covered in a layer of frost. If an astral reaching expert were to approach Yi Chen at this moment, they would immediately suffer from frostbite. If they were too close, they might even be frozen into an ice sculpture, without any vitality. Enduring the bone-chilling cold, Yi Chen smiled bitterly and took out the painting. Perhaps Senior Yuan Emperor knows what's going on with this fire poison. The painting unfolded, and Yi Chen poured in Jin Yuan. Buzz. The ink figure on the way came to life, turning around and walking out of the painting. What's the trouble now? Yuan Emperor's image asked subconsciously. Yi Chen said, Senior Yuan Emperor, do you know what kind of fire poison is in my body? In fact, there was no need for Yi Chen to ask. Yuan Emperor's image had already sensed Yi Chen's abnormality. The latter's body temperature was even lower than an iceberg. If this continued, he would freeze to death. Placing his palm on Yi Chen's shoulder, Yuan Emperor's image poured a strand of Zhen Yuan into Yi Chen's body. After a long while, he said solemnly, This is starfire poison. Starfire poison? Yi Chen didn't understand. Yuan Emperor's image explained, in the core of a star, apart from the high temperature, there is also a frightening fire poison. Normally, this fire poison wouldn't gather together, and would be very scattered. However, as time passes, the fire poison in the core of the star would gather together, forming a star poison fire drill. This star poison fire drill has an extremely high density of fire poison. Gradually, it mutated, turning into a strange poison that's hard to remove. Who did you fight with? How strong was he? Yuan Emperor's image asked. An ordinary life and death king. Poison Fire King was not a powerful life and death king. He was only a bit stronger than Giant Wolf King. The Yuan Emperor's image said, with his strength, it's impossible for him to cultivate the poison and fire profundities to a high level, and it's impossible for him to create something comparable to the starfire poison. If I'm not wrong, he definitely has the star poison fire drill, and is using the star poison to fuse with his own strength to attack you. Star poison fire drills fire poison, no wonder. Yi Chen suddenly understood. Poison Fire King was a human, but he was using his mouth to spit out energy. He should have a star poison fire drill inside his body to complement his attack. Then, how do I remove it? Yuan Emperor's image shook his head, it's very difficult. If I weren't dead, removing the starfire poison would be very simple. However, although I have a large amount of Zhen Yuan sealed in my body, I'm not a living person. If I forcibly remove the poison for you, a single mistake would cause your body to collapse. Only if you can cultivate broken limb regrowth to the late stage would I dare to try. But, if you can cultivate it to the late stage, perhaps you won't need my help. You can slowly remove it, and you'll eventually succeed. Chapter 880. Of course, it's not like there's no other way. I can think of at least 4. Yuan Emperor was, after all, a peerless figure who could shake heaven and earth. His strength could be ranked at the forefront of titled monarchs since ancient times. With such high strength, his knowledge was naturally not lacking. Which 4? Yi Chen asked. The first is to raise the spirit body's rank. You're currently at the 4th step. If you raise it to the 5th step, the starfire poison will be easily removed. You should also know that the spirit body is harder to raise with each step. 4th step spirit body is only the ordinary standard for life and death kings, while 5th step spirit body is the average. The difference between the 4th and 5th step is huge, and the poison resistance will also increase by tenfold. 5th step spirit body, easier said than done. Yi Chen smiled bitterly. The reason he could raise his spirit body to the 4th step was thanks to the 5,000 years old Sky Fiend Fire Spirit Fruit. Without it, it would have taken him several months or even half a year to raise his spirit body's rank. Raising his spirit body to the 5th step would be several times more difficult than entering life and death realm. Yuan Emperor's projection naturally knew how difficult it was to raise the spirit body's rank, so he smiled. Raising it through normal means is unlikely. It would take too much time, and the starfire poison would have long entered your heart. What I'm saying is to find some treasures that can raise the spirit body's rank, such as the Sky Fiend Fire Spirit Fruit or the Dragon Scale Fruit. Of course, if you can find the fresh blood of a giant dragon king, the effect wouldn't be any worse than the Dragon Scale Fruit. Giant Dragon King. Yi Chen's brows twitched. Shu Jing was a golden dragon, so she more or less met the requirements. However, Shu Jing hadn't completely transformed into a golden dragon, and she wasn't a giant dragon king either. By the time she met the requirements, it would be too late. What about the second? The first was too difficult. Whether it was the Sky Fiend Fire Spirit Fruit, Dragon Scale Fruit, or Giant Dragon King's Fresh Blood, they were all extremely difficult. The second is relatively easier. Become a life and death king. Yuan Emperor smiled and continued, "Wait until you become a life and death king. Not to mention purifying your Jin Yuan to king grade, your undying body will also reach flesh and blood derivation realm. A mere starfire poison will be no different from impurities." This was indeed a little simpler. It was easier than cultivating the immortal body to the later stages of limb rebirth. Although it was a different path to the same goal, the way to solve it was different. As long as Yi Chen comprehended a bit more life Dao, advancing to life and death realm would be 90% certain. Of course, relying on entering life and death realm was a bit risky. Who knew how long it would take? It could be as short as 3 to 5 months, or as long as 3 to 5 years. The third method is the hardest for you, but also the simplest. Raise your destruction sword intent to the 6th level, and use it to eliminate the active starfire poison. Once it's active, the starfire poison will turn into a dead object, which can be easily removed. Eliminating the active starfire poison could already be considered a profound and microscopic level. After all, ordinary people would find it hard to understand that fire poison was a kind of poison. Peak 5th step destruction sword intent. To be honest, you've given me quite a shock. If it were an ordinary poison, it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. If the density of the starfire poison was not high enough, it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. Unfortunately, the density of the starfire poison is too high, and it has mutated into a strange poison. Only an ordinary 7th step sword intent can eliminate its active starfire poison. Converted to your destruction sword intent, it's at the 6th step. Yuan Emperor quite admired Yi Chen. This kind of sword Dao genius with astonishing potential would be a frightening genius even in the ancient and medieval eras. Martial will and sword will were the same as spirit body. The higher one went, the harder it would be to improve. If the 4th step spirit body was the ordinary standard of life and death kings, then the 5th step martial will would be the ordinary standard of life and death kings, and the 6th step martial will would be the average standard. Yi Chen had already surpassed the average standard, because his peak 5th step destruction sword intent was equivalent to a peak 6th step sword intent. This seems a bit better. Hearing these words, Yi Chen faintly nodded. A peak 5th step destruction sword intent alone would be hard to reach the 6th step. However, he was different. He had the 5th step immortal sword intent. The two great sword intents resonated with each other, allowing him to improve at an extremely fast pace. Recently, he had already felt signs of his destruction sword intent advancing. Once his destruction sword intent reached the 6th step, even if Yi Chen's battle strength didn't increase by several folds, it would at least skyrocket. The further one advanced, the greater the gap between the levels. For example, the gap between the 4th and 5th step was not as big as the gap between the 5th and 6th step, and the gap between the 6th and 7th step was not as big as the gap between the 7th and 8th step. Legend had it that at the 9th or even 10th step, each step was like a whole new world. The 4th method is the fastest way to solve your problem, and that is to find a peak king to help you expel the poison. It's best if they have some achievements in dissolving strange poisons. If it doesn't work, find a peak king who cultivates ice profound. These two peak kings can easily dispel the mutated starfire poison without any danger. Right. That demonic human emperor is not bad. She should be able to help you expel the poison. Yuan Emperor's silhouette thought of something. Yuan Emperor's first thought was demonic human emperor, because she was the strongest king he had seen in this era. However, Yi Chen's first thought was Shenhu. Xuanho's strength might not be as good as demonic human emperor's, but in terms of dissolving strange poisons, demonic human emperor should be far inferior to her. Every profession had its own specialization, and this principle was applicable everywhere. Let's see how it goes. Rather than looking for demonic human emperor, he might as well look for Shenhu. The former might not agree, but the latter was much more reliable. Although he couldn't return to True Spirit Continent, he could find someone to pass the message. You're right, she might not save you. Yuan Emperor's silhouette nodded. Before that, I'll teach you a great poison dispelling art. Great poison dispelling art? Upon hearing this, Yi Chen knew that this art was not ordinary at all. Great poison dispelling art is a heaven-grade high-grade art. It can only be used to save people and oneself. Don't look down on it. If not for the lack of time, this art could easily dispel the mutated starfire poison. I'll teach you this art, but you must cultivate it as soon as possible. Only then can you suppress the mutated starfire poison without relying on ice attribute energy. As a peerless figure of his era, Yuan Emperor seemed to know a little bit of everything. The higher one's level was, the greater the danger one would face, and the more bizarre it would be. The less one knew, the less one's ability to survive. The more one knew, the less one had to worry about. This was the so-called having more skills is never a burden. All right. Yi Chen nodded vigorously. Don't reject it. Yuan Emperor's silhouette pointed at Yi Chen's forehead. In an instant, a complicated art appeared in Yi Chen's mind. After 3 breaths, Yuan Emperor's silhouette retracted his finger. Opening his eyes, Yi Chen said gratefully, "Thank you, Senior." "No need to thank me. The stronger you are, the more tricks you have, the greater the hope of preserving Elysium in the future. The unfinished battles of ancient, medieval, and modern times will still depend on you all." Yuan Emperor's silhouette sighed. Yi Chen knew what Yuan Emperor was talking about, so he asked, "What realm do I need to reach?" "At least my realm." Yi Chen was silent. A realm like Yuan Emperor's had already disappeared in this era. Of course, just you alone is not enough. In my era, there were a lot of people with the same strength as the demonic human emperor. Even so, once the war broke out, they all fell one by one. The people from the other world are very powerful, some of them are not even weaker than me. If Elysium is a low-level civilization, then they are a high-level civilization. Since the ancient times, we have been fighting against them, fighting for a place for our future generations to live. I hope that this world that belongs to us will continue to exist. Yuan Emperor's silhouette looked at Yi Chen. The sword in my hand must be stained with the blood of the powerful warriors from the other world. Yi Chen said seriously. I believe you can do it, but the premise is that you can survive. Finally, you have to remember that powerful warriors grow from killing. No matter if it is the other world or the same world, as long as it is your enemy, do not be soft-hearted. Kill when you need to kill, and if you don't need to kill, you have to lower the threat to the minimum. You should understand what I am saying. Yuan Emperor's silhouette said coldly. Yi Chen will remember. Right now, Yuan Emperor was the invincible Yuan Emperor. Being soft-hearted was never the right choice, especially in this world where only powerful warriors were respected. Yi Chen could imagine that when Yuan Emperor climbed to the top, he must have stepped on countless corpses, some from the same world, and some from the other world. I don't think I need to worry. You can comprehend the destruction sword intent, so this shouldn't be a problem. All right, I've taught you what I should, and I've said what I should. Now, you have to rely on yourself. The primitive emperor's image walked into the climbing heights and seeing far, painting and blended into the ink figure with his back facing the outside world. Putting away the painting, Yi Chen pondered for a while. Life and death realm is the starting point. The road ahead is still long, but it suits me just fine. Yi Chen enjoyed the process of growing stronger. The difficulty of cultivating poison conversion great art was extremely high, and there were many steps as well. In order to get started, one had to first learn how to use the poison conversion great art to understand the basic composition of any poison, from macroscopic to microscopic. Then, one had to break down the poison, because some strange poisons, once broken down, would not be as harmful. Finally, one had to use the poison conversion great art to refine it step by step. Of the 3 steps, one could be considered to have gotten started, and the other 2 would be accomplished. Only by accomplishing all of them would one be considered to have minor success. After minor success, one would have to convert the poison conversion great art into instinct. The reason why one had to convert it into instinct was that some poisons could spread very quickly, and one would have to race against time. If one couldn't, one would naturally lose, and the loss would be one's life. Reaching this step would be considered major success. As for grand completion, it would be the most difficult step. When the poison conversion great art reached grand completion, one's body would produce a mysterious poison conversion energy. This energy had its own spirituality, and had already fused with one's instinct. The majority of poisons would immediately be broken down upon contact, as if they had met their nemesis. Let's get started first. Sitting cross-legged on the stone platform, Yi Chen began to cultivate the poison conversion great art. Chapter 881. The great poison conversion art was worthy of being a high-grade heaven-grade secret art. Its cultivation difficulty was not inferior to the 5-star mid-grade heaven-grade secret art, blood-severing ghost finger. After spending a whole week, Yi Chen had barely grasped the basics. Through the great poison conversion art, he could observe the basic composition of the variant starfire poison. However, observing was observing. It didn't mean that Yi Chen could dissect the poison. After another week, Yi Chen was able to decompose the starfire poison, completing the second step. Unfortunately, he could only dissect the spreading poison, which was the vanguard of the poison. Eradicating the poison was not something that could be done in a day or two. Moreover, while Yi Chen was dissecting the vanguard, the poison was also transforming into Jinyuan, strengthening itself. Strictly speaking, Yi Chen's dissecting speed was not as fast as the poison's Jinyuan transformation. As time went on, the poison would grow stronger and stronger, and Yi Chen would no longer be its opponent. His body would become the domain of the poison. I have to reach the third step and cultivate the great poison conversion art to minor completion. The poison conversion great art of small perfection could refine the starfire poison that had been broken down. Even if it could not completely eradicate the starfire poison, it could at least prevent the starfire poison from turning into quintessence and strengthening itself. Xiao Chen could use this time to find other methods to eradicate the starfire poison. Blood Sky Continent was the second continent of Elysium. Although it was only half the size of True Spirit Continent, its widest point was 30 million li, and its narrowest point was 18 million li. It was shaped like a huge coconut, and comparing it to a heart was not an exaggeration. Just like True Spirit Continent, Blood Sky Continent was also filled with all kinds of danger zones and forbidden zones. Some of them were so dangerous that even life and death kings would find it hard to survive. Bloodlight Ocean was ranked 4th on Blood Sky Continent. Its name was Bloodlight Ocean, but it was not a real ocean. Bloodlight Ocean was located in the eastern part of Iron Blood region. Blood-colored chi drifted throughout the year, resembling a bloodlight or a blood ocean. Therefore, it was named Bloodlight Ocean. Bloodlight Sea had two superficial dangers. One was blood demons. Bloodlight Ocean was a breeding ground for blood demons. The number of blood demons inside was enormous, and no one knew exactly how many there were. Low-rank blood demons, middle-rank blood demons, high-rank blood demons, blood demon generals, blood demon kings, everything that one could imagine could be found there. Due to the special rules of Bloodlight Ocean and its boundless power, the Blood Sky Continent's demonic beast kings and life and death kings couldn't erase this breeding ground of blood demons. They could only allow it to exist as long as the blood demons didn't come out. The second was the chaotic will. If one stayed in the Bloodlight Sea for a long time, one would be invaded by the chaotic will. If it was light, one would become a lunatic. If it was heavy, one would become bloodthirsty and become a member of the heterogeneous blood devils. Due to the existence of these two great dangers, even though the Bloodlight Sea's ranking wasn't as high as the third-ranked King-grade Forbidden Zone, its reputation was greater than the third-ranked King-grade Forbidden Zone. Just the mention of it would cause one's face to change. Old Chang, this is our second time coming to the Bloodlight Ocean after 100 years. At the entrance of Bloodlight Sea, space shattered, and two middle-aged men walked out. That's right. 100 years have passed, and my descendants have all grown old. Monkey, last time, 4 of us went in, but only 2 came out. This time, you and I must come out alive. The middle-aged man with a long beard, who looked to be in his 50s, sighed emotionally. The middle-aged man called Monkey was not a human, but a monkey that had cultivated into a demonic king. He nodded heavily, definitely. This time, if we come out alive, I will take out the supreme grade monkey wine that I have kept for more than 200 years to share with you. You should have given me some when you came. So stingy. Fine, For the sake of your supreme-grade monkey wine, I must survive. Otherwise, I will suffer a great loss. If a knowledgeable person was here, he would definitely recognize that the middle-aged man with a long beard and the middle-aged man with a pointy mouth and ape-like chin were the solitary kings of the Blood Sky continent. They were the Anika Spear King and the Iron Monkey King. Although the Anika Spear King and the Iron Monkey King were not of the same race, one was a human, the other a demonic beast, they had a very good relationship. It could be said that they were brothers that had gone through life and death together. 100 years ago, they had another brother who was also a demonic king called the Black-Horned King. Unfortunately, the Black-Horned King had been killed by the Blood Devil King of the Bloodlight Ocean. Come, let's go in. This time, no matter what, we must get a blood crystal flower. The Anika Spear King's figure flashed, entering the Bloodlight Ocean. The Iron Monkey King followed closely behind. A few days later, it rained heavily outside the entrance of the Bloodlight Ocean. The sky was overcast, and dark clouds loomed overhead. Swish! A sword light cut through the sky, speeding over. When it was less than 100 meters away from the entrance, the sword light vanished, and a young figure appeared. He had a head of thick black hair, wearing a loose blue robe. It was Yi Chen. After training the poison-melting great art to the entry level, he was able to suppress the starfire poison for a while. Then, he stopped training and started to prepare for the cure. After asking around, Yi Chen found out that there was a king-grade forbidden zone in the Iron Blood region called Bloodlight Ocean. There was a kind of blood crystal flower that was neither a plant nor a mineral. Eating it could increase the strength of one's spirit body. Depending on the age of the blood crystal flower, the effect would vary. A 10,000 years old blood crystal flower could increase one's spirit body by half a step. Of course, this was only for those below the 5th step. Even 10,000 years old blood crystal flowers would not be able to increase the spirit body from the 5th step to the 6th step. Although the effect of the blood crystal flower was far inferior to the Sky Fiend Fire Spirit Fruit, it was something that Yi Chen urgently needed. Even if it couldn't raise his spirit body to the 5th step, it could still strengthen his spirit body and increase his poison resistance. Bloodlight Ocean is a dangerous place even for life and death kings. I don't have to fear the chaotic will as long as it's not too excessive. However, I have to be on guard against blood demon kings. Blood demons were born from blood. They were ever-changing and had no concrete form. When facing an enemy, if they found a flaw, they would turn into a bloodlight and drill into one's body. Even if one had gargantuan skills, one could only die with hatred. However, I must obtain the blood crystal flower. With a flicker, Yi Chen turned into a sword light and entered Bloodlight Ocean. Bloodlight Ocean was like a universe, boundless as far as the eye could see. It was clearly raining outside, but there was not the slightest movement inside. The sky was bright red, and the ground was covered by blood chi currents. The blood chi currents were bobbing up and down, like an unceasingly flowing blood ocean. This ocean was even emitting a blood radiance. What a powerful law! As soon as Yi Chen entered Bloodlight Ocean, he immediately felt his body sink several dozen meters. The pressure and gravitational force acting on his body were 100 times that of the outside world. As for his soul power, it could only spread several dozen li. Fortunately, this Bloodlight Ocean differs from person to person. The rules are not rigid. Bloodlight Ocean adjusted the pressure according to one's cultivation base. For example, if Yi Chen was at the peak of the 3rd layer, the pressure would be 100 times. However, if it were a life and death king, the pressure would be 1,000 times. Thus, the gap between the two did not widen, remaining within the same range. Otherwise, 100 times pressure would be nothing to life and death kings. They could still fly at high speed, and Yi Chen couldn't catch up to them. However, they could easily catch up to Yi Chen. Swish! The blood chi currents condensed, and a bloodlight pounced at Yi Chen. Die! Yi Chen pointed his finger, and a sword light shattered the bloodlight. The destruction sword intent prevented the bloodlight from condensing again. Flying close to the ground, Yi Chen flew toward the depths of Bloodlight Ocean. A day passed, and Yi Chen had a rough understanding of Bloodlight Ocean's details. The blood demons of Bloodlight Ocean were usually hidden within the blood chi currents. Once someone approached and triggered the blood chi currents, they would turn into bloodlight and attack crazily. If one's luck was bad, and the blood chi currents triggered happened to be the blood demon's body, one would be in for a miserable time, having their flesh and blood sucked dry. Yi Chen had encountered it once. Fortunately, it was only an ordinary blood demon general, which was equivalent to a Sea of Soul Realm expert. Moreover, Yi Chen's destruction sword intent and immortal sword intent were its bane. The consequences could be easily imagined. Worthy of being called Bloodlight Ocean. It's too dangerous. Amidst the blood chi currents, Yi Chen sighed. Bloodlight Ocean was filled with blood chi currents. In other words, there could be blood demons hidden everywhere. Encountering blood demons below the Blood Demon King realm was fine, but encountering a Blood Demon King, even Yi Chen would be in mortal danger. After all, he couldn't release his sword domain and sword intent all the time. Rumble. An earth-shattering explosion could be heard from the front. Battle of Kings. Yi Chen's eyes squinted. Let's go take a look. I'll be on guard in the future. The dangers of Bloodlight Ocean were not only visible, but also hidden. Yi Chen didn't know much about them, so he had to learn more to strengthen his survivability. The battlefield was quite far away, so Yi Chen followed the energy ripples. Not wanting to get too close, Yi Chen stopped far away. Open. The vertical silver eye on his forehead opened, and Yi Chen looked over with his soul eye. In his line of sight, 3 figures were engaged in a fierce battle. Boundless energy swept out in all directions, sweeping away the blood chi currents and clearing out an empty space. Of these 3 figures, 2 were clearly from the same group. One wielded a spear and was a human king. The other had transformed into a demonic monkey and was a beast king. The last one had a blood chi current around his body, and his eyes were blood red. It's really a hetero blood demon king. Bloodlight Ocean's chaotic will would have a greater influence on the intruder. If one couldn't endure the invasion of the chaotic will, they would lose their nature and turn into a berserk demon. As time passed, they would suffer the invasion of the blood chi and slowly be transformed into a hetero blood demon, whose danger was no less than that of a blood demon. It should be known that Bloodlight Ocean had existed for countless years. Countless kings had entered and been transformed into hetero blood demon kings by the chaotic will and blood chi. More importantly, according to the observations of observant people, the lifespan of hetero blood demon kings far exceeded 1,000 years. As for how long they could live, it was hard to say. Thus, even if they didn't meet a blood demon king, they would still die if they met a mutant blood demon king. Perhaps they weren't peak kings when they were alive because peak kings wouldn't be affected by the chaotic intent. However, there was another possibility, and that was that a powerful king might not have a strong intent, but his cultivation was ridiculously strong. Chapter 882. Boom Boom Boom. The heterogeneous Blood Demon King was extremely powerful. It was even stronger than Poison Fire King and Bloodhand King. In a one-on-one fight, Yi Chen was definitely not its match. He could only run away. After all, the soul light was useless against such a heterogeneous Blood Demon King. Their souls were chaotic and could not be affected by dizziness. Unless the soul light was strong enough to destroy the opponent's soul in one blow. The heterogeneous Blood Demon King was powerful, but his opponent was not weak either. The spear-wielding human king's strength was similar to Poison Fire King's. Although the demonic monkey king was slightly weaker, it was not by much. The human and the demon worked together and suppressed the heterogeneous Blood Demon King in a short while. Soul-seeking impermanence spear. The long-bearded middle-aged man roared and thrust his spear. The spear pierced through the heterogeneous Blood Demon King's head without any trace. Break for me. The demonic monkey king was not big. It was only 3 meters tall. Its body was very agile. In a flash, it appeared behind the heterogeneous Blood Demon King and slashed down with its claws. Poochie. The heterogeneous Blood Demon King was dismembered. Blood splattered everywhere. Ha ha, monkey, well done. The long-bearded middle-aged man kept his spear and stood still. The demonic monkey king turned into human form and laughed. It was also because of your good cooperation. The human and the demon had worked together countless times. They had long formed a tacit understanding. When the two worked together, they could defeat enemies that were much stronger than them. Such a brilliant spear art. It actually contains the wind profound and the cloud profound. These two profounds are the most proficient in transformations. When combined, its power might not be comparable to other fused profounds, but it is hard to defend against. In the early days, Yi Chen had also studied the cloud mentality. Later on, he switched to studying the thunder mentality, which was related to the cloud mentality. But he had limited energy, so it was impossible for him to study everything. He could only choose the one that was most useful to him, and study it when he had more time. Of course, after so many years, the cloud intent had also advanced to the cloud profound. It was only 10% of the realm. Closing his soul eye, Yi Chen turned and left. The bloodlight ocean was boundless. The space inside was huge, far beyond what the outside world could see. As time passed, Yi Chen had already stayed in the bloodlight ocean for 3 days. During these 3 days, he could clearly feel a chaotic will trying to invade his soul sea and infect his soul. His soul membrane could only defend against soul power, but it was helpless against a will attack. Fortunately, he still had the destruction sword soul and the immortal sword soul in his sea of soul. The two rank 5 sword souls were guarding the sea of soul. Once the chaotic will invaded, it was immediately minced into nothingness. The chaotic will was nothing to him. In these 3 days, he had encountered true danger twice. The first time was when he was surrounded by blood demon generals. Thousands of blood demon generals charged at him, causing bloodlight to flutter in the air. The second time was when he encountered a hetero blood demon king wandering around bloodlight ocean. Its strength was not weaker than the hetero blood demon king he encountered 3 days ago, and was even slightly stronger. Facing thousands of blood demon generals, Yi Chen used all his means and consumed a third of his Jin Yuan to kill half of them before escaping. Facing the blood demon, Yi Chen didn't have any other thoughts, so he directly fled. In a one-on-one battle, he was not the opponent of the blood demon. Tangling with it would only waste his Jin Yuan, which was not worth it. He didn't come to Bloodlight Ocean to fight, but for the blood crystal flower. Bloodlight Ocean's space is extremely sturdy. I can't travel through space. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to escape from the blood demon. Walking on the road, Yi Chen kept his soul power at all times. But this won't do. If I want to roam the king-grade forbidden zone, it's best to raise my cultivation to life and death realm. Otherwise, I might die. One had to be alive to enjoy opportunities. If the danger was too great, death would be inevitable. Yeah, there's a mountain range here. Yi Chen stopped and sensed with his soul power. There was a mountain range 20 li ahead. In the Bloodlight Ocean, there were very few mountain ranges. Most of them were plains and hills, and the blood crystal flower would normally grow in the mountain ranges. It could be underground, on the cliff of a mountain peak, or at the bottom of a lake in the mountain range. In short, the blood crystal flower would appear anywhere in the mountain range, and it didn't need a specific environment. Since there's a mountain range, there must be a blood crystal flower. Let's go in. Dispelling distracting thoughts, Yi Chen's gaze turned sharp as he cautiously entered the mountain range. Since Yi Chen's soul power could only extend a few dozen li, Yi Chen couldn't see how big the mountain range was or what the environment was like. He could only take one step at a time. The place Yi Chen entered was a canyon. The canyon towered into the clouds. Looking up, one could only see a sliver of the sky. It was extremely gloomy and quiet. Swish, swish, swish. After walking for 7 li, a dozen bloodlights suddenly shot at Yi Chen. Sword domain. Yi Chen didn't panic in the face of danger. He released his sword domain, and the enormous sword pressure caused the bloodlights to slow down. Unsheathing the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen slashed one after another. His powerful sword chi tore apart the bloodlights, while his destruction sword intent made them unable to reform and gradually dissipate. Jejje. The true threat had arrived. The blood chi in front of Yi Chen converged, forming a blood devil king. This blood devil king's arms were like bamboo poles, extremely thin and long. Its palms were like eagle claws, incomparably sharp. Swish. With an air-piercing sound, Blood Demon King's right arm rapidly lengthened and turned into a blood-colored drill, drilling toward Yi Chen's forehead at a speed as fast as blood-colored lightning. Ding! Raising the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen blocked the Blood Devil King's sneak attack. But the Blood Devil King's terror lay in its ability to change its shape at will. After the Blood Devil King's right arm was deflected, it lengthened once more and coiled around Yi Chen like a red thread. Extinguish! Yi Chen didn't dare to be careless. He executed bewitching mirror shattering, sealing the red thread in a spatial mirror and shattering it into thousands of pieces. Congealing water. Like a sword light, Yi Chen flew close to the ground and thrust his sword out. Blood Demon King sneered and unexpectedly ignored Yi Chen's sword. His body rapidly turned into a blood-colored hedgehog, each spike several hundred meters long, and launched a full-range attack. PFFF. Yi Chen's congealing water landed on the Blood Devil King's body first. A burst of power instantly tore the Blood Devil King's body apart. Sword intent and death chi gushed out, completely extinguishing the Blood Devil King's vitality. A low-level Blood Devil King. There's no way it can resist my congealing water. Yi Chen had a natural advantage over Blood Devil Kings. Firstly, the evil vanquishing sword contained an innate suppressive power. Secondly, Yi Chen's peak 5th step destruction sword intent was a great killing weapon for the Blood Devil King. Struck by an attack containing destruction sword intent, the Blood Devil King would find it hard to reform its body, unless it was a mid or high-level Blood Devil King. Thirdly, Yi Chen had already comprehended Death Dao. In this aspect, he was no weaker than ordinary Life and Death Kings. With these three advantages, even some Life and Death Kings stronger than Yi Chen couldn't kill a low-level Blood Devil King as easily as Yi Chen. Plop! With the Blood Devil King's death, a blood-colored crystal fell on the ground. Blood Demon Crystal. Yi Chen extended his hand and sucked the crystal into his hand. Blood Demon Crystal was a supreme-grade material that could only be nurtured within a Blood Devil King's body. Inside a Blood Devil King's body, it didn't have a solid body. It could disperse and reform like the Blood Devil King at any time. However, once a Blood Devil King died, the crystal could no longer disperse and turned into a solid body. As a top-grade material, the Blood Demon Crystal had great uses. It could not only make up for one's own losses, replenish one's vitality, but also enhance the strength of one's spirit body. Moreover, it could be used as a material for forging treasures. If a treasure was integrated with the Blood Demon Crystal, it could absorb the opponent's vitality while attacking to replenish one's own losses. It was extremely overbearing. Although Life and Death Kings already had an undying body, with their flesh, bones, and Jin Yuan fused into one, before reaching the flesh derivation realm, using the undying body too many times wouldn't be able to bear it. At this moment, the body was still the dominant factor, and not Jin Yuan. Therefore, Blood Demon Crystal was extremely useful for Life and Death Kings at the Limb Rebirth realm. Of course, if one reached the flesh derivation realm, it wouldn't be a problem. Blood Demon Crystal could strengthen one's spirit body. Nobody would think that their spirit body was strong enough. 4th step spirit body could be upgraded to 5th step, and 5th step spirit body could be upgraded to 6th step. Finally, when one felt that ordinary Blood Demon Crystal could no longer strengthen one's spirit body, one could use it as a material and fuse it with other metals to forge an artifact. In short, Blood Demon Crystal was a low-end commodity among Life and Death Kings. A low-level Blood Demon Crystal was not inferior to a high-grade semi-supreme grade artifact. A mid-level Blood Demon Crystal was equivalent to a pseudo-supreme grade artifact. High-level was equivalent to a supreme grade artifact. Many people came to the Bloodlight Ocean not only because of the Blood Crystal Flower, but also because of the existence of the Blood Demon King. If they could obtain a primary Blood Demon Crystal, it could be considered a harvest, even if it was not as valuable as the Blood Crystal Flower. Of course, if one wanted to obtain something, one had to pay a price. Ordinary Life and Death Kings would find it hard to kill a low-level Blood Demon King, unless they were like Yi Chen and possessed the evil Shattering Sword, Destruction Sword Intent, or Immortal Sword Intent. Otherwise, if they encountered a Blood Demon King in Bloodlight Ocean, their chances of dying would be extremely high. As for peak kings and titled monarchs, The majority of them didn't care about low-level or mid-level blood demon crystals. Rather than coming to Bloodlight Ocean, they might as well go to better places to try their luck and obtain better treasures. Of course, for their disciples and descendants, they might make a trip here sometimes. However, the chances of encountering them were simply too small, perhaps not even once in several hundred years. After obtaining the low-level blood demon crystal, Yi Chen left the canyon and found a seemingly safe place to refine it, strengthening his spirit body. Chapter 883. As expected of the blood demon crystal. It allowed my spirit body to improve a little from the peak of the 4th step. It's a pity that the low-level blood demon crystal can only help a 4th step spirit body. The higher one's spirit body was, the harder it was to improve. The low-level blood demon crystal was still useful to Yi Chen, as it could improve the strength of his spirit body. However, for a 5th step spirit body, it was useless no matter how many low-level blood demon crystals he had. This was because the human body had resistance. Using the same thing too many times would cause resistance and rejection. In the end, there would be no effect at all. It was like taking medicine. If one took too many of the same medicine, the effect would be minimal. Of course, although the low-level blood demon crystal couldn't improve Yi Chen's spirit body to the 5th step, it could push his 4th step spirit body to the limit. The more he refined, the easier it would be for him to break through to the 5th step spirit body. After all, most of the time, he still had to rely on himself to break through. Heavenly treasures weren't easy to find, and those that could improve the spirit body were even rarer. Senior Yuan Sovereign is right. The stronger the spirit body, the stronger the poison resistance. My spirit body has only improved a little. It may not seem like a big improvement, but I can feel that the starfire poison is less harmful to me. Letting out a breath, Yi Chen stood up with a smile on his face. Let's not worry about this for now. I'll continue looking for blood crystal flowers and try my luck to see if I can encounter other low-level blood demon kings. There were strong and weak low-level blood demon kings. Yi Chen wasn't a match for the strong ones, but at least he had a chance to escape. With the existence of Sword Domain, he could suppress the opponent's speed. Of course, it would be best if he didn't encounter a mid-level blood demon king. After passing through the canyon, Yi Chen arrived at the interior of the mountain range. Blood crystal flowers don't grow at a fixed location. It won't be easy to find them on the surface. I can use my soul power to search for them, but underground is a bit troublesome. On the surface of Bloodlight Ocean, Yi Chen's soul power could cover dozens of li. However, under the ground, the effect was dozens of times weaker, only able to penetrate 1 li or 2. Yi Chen couldn't even detect a blood crystal flower that was a bit deeper underground. Perhaps, there might even be a blood crystal flower several li under his feet. I can only try my luck. Yi Chen flew at a constant speed. In the mountain range, the terrain was complex. There were waterfalls, lakes, forests, but most of them were barren mountains. After passing by a barren mountain, Yi Chen suddenly stopped. It's a blood crystal flower fragment. On the barren mountain, a blood-red crystal was emitting a dazzling light. Picking up the blood-red crystal, Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Once the blood crystal flower was shattered, the effect would be reduced to 1% at most. Only a whole blood crystal flower would have a huge effect. Looking at the desolate mountain, Yi Chen understood that a fierce battle must have taken place here. Otherwise, no one would destroy the integrity of the blood crystal flower. After throwing away the blood crystal flower shards, Yi Chen continued to fly at a constant speed. 3 days later, Yi Chen had explored more than half of the mountain range. Yes, he is a low-level blood devil king. His opponent is a demon king. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. With the evil vanquishing sword and destruction sword intent, he was destined to be the nemesis of most low-level blood devil kings. Dozens of li away, a low-level blood devil king was fighting with a dog-type demon king. The dog-type demon king was only an ordinary demon king, and his strength was inferior to Poison Fire King and Bloodhand King. He was in a very sorry state. He wanted to escape, but he couldn't escape the pursuit of the Blood Devil King. He could only passively resist, roaring continuously. Damn it! The dog-type demon monarch roared and spat out a ball of light. The light sphere exploded, and half of the Blood Devil King's body was blown to pieces. But soon, the body reformed. Taking advantage of the short pause after the dog-type demon king used his trump card, the light sphere turned into a bloodlight and drilled into the dog-type demon king's body. The dog-type demon king's body shriveled at a visible speed. In the next moment, the bloodlight drilled out of the dog-type demon king's body, and its aura became even more powerful. Kill. With no time to lose, Yi Chen rushed forward. The Blood Devil King also discovered Yi Chen, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he also rushed forward. The two rapidly approached each other. When they were only a kilometer away, Yi Chen released his sword domain, and a powerful sword pressure acted on the Blood Devil King's body, reducing his speed. Congealing water. Unsheathing the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen attacked. Poochie. Half of the Blood Devil King's body shattered, unable to reform. Although the remaining half of the Blood Devil King didn't die, his aura was much weaker. Fear flashed across his face as he quickly fled to the right. Unfortunately, the existence of the sword domain prevented him from displaying even half of his speed. Die. Bewitching mirror shattering was used, and the escaping Blood Devil King was shattered into thousands of pieces. A low-level Blood Devil crystal fell down. My luck is not bad. Another one. Reaching out his hand, Yi Chen sucked the Blood Devil crystal over with a satisfied expression. I have to find a place to refine the Blood Devil crystal and increase the strength of my spirit body. Yi Chen was used to fighting steadily. This bloodlight ocean was filled with dangers, and if he could increase his survivability a little bit, it would be good. The stronger his spirit body, the stronger his physical defense. Not good. Just as he was about to leave, Yi Chen became vigilant and soared into the sky. Rumble. A huge gully appeared on the ground below. Blood-red flames burned fiercely, burning the ground of the bloodlight ocean into blood-red crystals. The temperature was astonishing. In the distance, a blood-red light sped over. It wasn't a pure Blood Devil King, but a variant Blood Devil King. That was close. If I was a little slower, I would have been crippled even if I didn't die. In the air, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes, sizing up the variant Blood Devil King that attacked him. This mutant Blood Devil King was not a human, but a mantis demon king. That attack just now was launched with its scythe-like appendages, and it was shaped like a blade light. This mantis fey king has wings on its back and is very fast. It won't be easy to shake it off. If it attracts the attention of other Blood Devil Kings or variant Blood Devil Kings, I'll be in trouble. Previously, Yi Chen had been able to escape the pursuit of a variant Blood Devil King because that variant Blood Devil King was only slightly faster than him. Moreover, it was suppressed by sword domain and couldn't increase its speed. That was why Yi Chen was able to escape. On the other hand, this mantis fey king was twice as fast as Yi Chen. Even sword domain couldn't shake it off. Since that's the case, we can only fight it out. The mantis fey king was indeed much stronger than the poison fire king, but it was still within Yi Chen's range. In a one-on-one battle, Yi Chen felt that he could give it a try. Sword domain attack. Azure swords condensed one after another. With a thought from Yi Chen, the azure swords shot out, covering the sky as they attacked the mantis fey king, preventing him from approaching. Clang, clang, clang. The mantis fey king's two appendages were like two huge scythes. With a casual wave, a blood-colored light screen appeared. The azure swords were immediately sent flying when they collided with the light screen. Bewitching mirror shattering. Space distorted and compressed, turning into a mirror that sealed the mantis fey king inside. Shortly after, the mirror shattered as sharp spatial blades crazily cut at the mantis fey king's body. This variant Blood Devil King is also restrained by evil vanquishing power and destruction sword intent. Yi Chen revealed a trace of joy. The wounds on the mantis fey king's body couldn't be completely healed. Even with his undying body, his wounds were still extremely heavy. Of course, the variant Blood Devil King wasn't a pureblood Blood Devil King after all, so the restraint wasn't that great. If it were a pureblood Blood Devil King, it probably wouldn't even have 50% of its fighting strength left. Kai. The mantis fey king was extremely powerful. While being attacked, he also slashed out a blood-red flame pillar. Yi Chen hastily raised his sword to block. Boom! The blood-red flame erupted, and Yi Chen was sent flying 7 to 8 li. Opening his mouth, he spurted out a mouthful of steaming blood mist. So powerful. I'm afraid he's an extremely powerful existence even among low-step variant Blood Devil Kings. Ordinary Life and Death Kings were also called low-step kings, which corresponded to low-step Blood Devil Kings and low-step variant Blood Devil Kings. Poison Fire King was merely a mid-level existence among low-step kings, and as for Giant Wolf King, he was a low-level existence. As for Mantis Fey King, he was a human king, and was more or less a high-level king. But I have Sword Domain. I can at least suppress him a little. Activating Sword Domain to the limit, the immense sword pressure caused the space of Bloodlight Ocean to become even more firm. Mantis Fey King's appendages gradually became more strenuous, becoming somewhat slower than before. Break for me. Exchanging his evil vanquishing sword for Sky Scorpio Sword, Yi Chen slashed out. Sky Scorpio Sword was, after all, Sky Scorpio Sword. The sword energy it emitted caused one of Mantis Fey King's appendages to crystallize and shatter. Buzz. Right at this moment, Mantis Fey King also went berserk. The several thin wings on his back suddenly vibrated, and a blood-red thread flew over. Not good. The blood-red thread was too fast. Yi Chen couldn't dodge it completely, and his left arm was chopped off. Recover. After regrowing his left arm, Yi Chen gravely sized up Mantis Fey King. This was his first time clashing head-on with such a powerful opponent, and he didn't have the slightest confidence of victory. Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance. The genius that several lords want to deal with actually appeared in Bloodlight Ocean and coincidentally ran into me. At an unknown time, a figure was standing on a mountain peak 10 li away. Hey! To be able to contend against a high-level low-step variant Blood Devil King, no wonder the lords listed him as a must-kill target. Once he enters Life and Death realm, I'm afraid even if my main body personally comes, I won't be able to do anything to him. In time, he'll definitely become another Xian Hu. Let's use a soul attack to kill him. A sinister grin appeared on the figure's face as he squinted his eyes. From between his brows, a formless soul power shot out like an arrow, targeting Yi Chen. The soul power attack was too fast. Yi Chen didn't have the slightest chance to react before being struck by the soul power. Feeling a wave of dizziness, Yi Chen was struck head-on by Mantis Fey King, breaking several of his ribs and sending him flying while spurting blood. Someone used a soul attack to attack me. This was the thought that flashed through Yi Chen's mind. Impossible. The figure was gobsmacked. Who was he? He was a grand high-step king. Although he was only a spiritual projection, and his soul power couldn't compare to his main bodies, it was still not something a peak third-layer life and death chamber brat could resist. In his opinion, this soul attack should be able to easily destroy Yi Chen's soul power. Ruthlessly crashing into a mountain cliff, Yi Chen looked in the direction of the figure. It's a human king. Why did you attack me? Yi Chen's soul power was 5 times that of an ordinary person, and his soul membrane was naturally extremely powerful. During the ranking battle, he could have ignored Marquis Sword Snow's soul attack, but he didn't want to expose himself too much. After all, his soul power was not inferior to Life and Death Kings in terms of quality. Chapter 884. No matter what, he is an enemy, not a friend. How can I escape? The Mantis Beast King, who had been transformed into a hetero blood demon king by the chaotic will and blood chi, had already rendered Yi Chen helpless. Now, there was also a human king, who looked several times stronger than the Mantis Beast King, which was truly a deadly situation. There was no way to escape, and there was no way to fight. Of course, if Yi Chen asked for the image of Yuan Emperor, this problem could be solved. However, Yi Chen did not intend to do so. If he asked for the image of Yuan Emperor every time he encountered danger, it would not serve as a tempering exercise. The image of Yuan Emperor could help him for a while, but not forever. If one wanted to pursue the limits of strength, one could only rely on oneself. One could not place one's hopes on others. In this situation, I have to fight with my own strength. Who knows, I might be able to make a breakthrough. In the worst case, I will ask for the image of Yuan Emperor at the moment of certain death. Yi Chen's actions were very dangerous. Perhaps he would be killed before he could ask for the image of Yuan Emperor. However, in order to reach the peak, he had to get used to this kind of life and death situation. On top of the mountain, fine. This spiritual projection of mine has 1/3 of the battle strength of the main body. Killing a low-step king-level brat will not be too difficult. The figure was wearing a mask, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. He stepped down from the peak and instantly arrived at the foot of the mountain. The Mantis Beast King was originally preparing to continue attacking Yi Chen. However, as soon as the masked man appeared, his target changed. To him, the masked man's aura was much more powerful, which made him feel very disgusted. The thin wings on his back vibrated, and his figure shot out, drawing a silk-like trace in the void as he appeared in front of the masked man in a flash. Pitiful. You have lost your basic intelligence. What do you have left? The masked man shook his head and pressed his palm toward the Mantis Beast King. Bang! Dazzling thunder and fire splashed. The Mantis Beast King had come quickly and left even faster. His two scythe-like limbs were broken inch by inch, and a large part of his chest had caved in, charred and smoking. What a tyrannical profound martial skill. Thunder profound and fire profound are both above 90%. I'm afraid they are close to the greater success stage. Yi Chen's pupils shrank. All along, he had been suppressing his opponents with his profound martial skills. However, this time, his opponent was 10 times stronger than him in terms of profound martial skills. The masked man leisurely flew over, sized up Yi Chen, and said, "What a pity, a peerless genius is going to fall in my hands." "Who are you?" Yi Chen had already recovered from his injuries and asked calmly. "You will never be able to guess my identity. Besides, you don't need to know. The dead have no right to know the truth. Die." The masked man attacked as soon as he said he would. With a palm strike, thunder and fire splashed everywhere. This move again. Yi Chen's pupils shrank to 2 dots. His left hand held the evil vanquishing sword in front of his chest, while his right hand held the Sky Scorpio sword, slashing out diagonally. At the same time, the 2 great sword souls in his sea of soul shook violently, setting off waves of sword-intent storms. The destruction and immortal sword-intents clashed, causing the sword-intents to vibrate. After the vibrations, the destruction sword-intent attached to the Sky Scorpio sword, while the immortal sword-intent fused with the evil vanquishing sword. The destruction sword-intent was the main attack. The immortal sword-intent was the main defense. At this moment, Yi Chen was using the 2 great sword-intents against an enemy for the first time. Bang! Yi Chen's sword move was congealing water. However, upon colliding with the thunder and fire, the sword energy was immediately incinerated into nothingness. The terrifying thunder and fire energy bombarded the evil vanquishing sword like a hot knife through butter, sending out a large amount of electric snakes and sparks. In almost an instant, Yi Chen's 5 viscera and 6 bowels were damaged. His ribs were all broken, and his arms exploded inch by inch, turning into ashes. In the next moment, blood flowed out of his 7 orifices as he was sent flying. Losing control of the Sky Scorpio sword and the evil vanquishing sword, he was about to fall to the ground. Too strong. This is a mid-step king. Yi Chen had used all his means, but he was still crushed in the end. A supreme grade sword, not bad. Noticing the Sky Scorpio sword, the masked man reached out to grab it. Come back. With a move of his soul power, the Sky Scorpio sword and the evil vanquishing sword turned into 2 streaks of light, chasing after Yi Chen. Grabbing nothing, a cold light flickered in the masked man's eyes. While flying back, Yi Chen was already operating his immortal body to recover his lost arms and damaged viscera. His injuries this time were too severe. Last time, when he was hit by the Poison Fire King's poison flame explosion, his arms and legs were incinerated into nothingness, and his viscera were injured. But this time, he had used up 40% of his Jin Yuan, and this was even with the congealing water sword energy counteracting a portion of the power. If he had only defended, he would have already fallen. To be able to receive one of my moves without dying is simply a miracle. You've truly surprised me. The masked man was indeed very surprised. Mantis Beast King was stronger than Yi Chen, but now, he was already crippled. Yet, the slightly weaker Yi Chen had actually survived. How could he not be surprised? However, you're still going to die. If one move isn't enough, how about 2 moves? The masked man took a step forward and pressed out a second palm, sending out thunder and fire. Destruction sword intent, breakthrough for me. With only 60% of his Zhen Yuan left in his body, he could still recover through his immortal body the second time he was hit. But, what about the third time? If he was hit for the third time, the remaining 20% of his Zhen Yuan would not be enough to heal his wounds. Most importantly, even if he had trained the poison melting art to the minor completion level, the mutated starfire poison still required Zhen Yuan to suppress. 20% of his Zhen Yuan was the bottom line. Once his Zhen Yuan was less than 20%, the masked man would not even need to do anything, as the mutated starfire poison would burn him into ashes. Wang, 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 wang. In the Soul Sea, the Destruction Sword Spirit and Immortal Sword Spirit resonated with each other. The Destruction Sword Spirit and Immortal Sword Spirit bloomed at the same time, illuminating more than half of the Soul Sea. Just as the thunder and fire energy was about to approach, the Destruction Sword Spirit suddenly shook and shone brightly. The Black Sword Spirit body seemed to have been sharpened, turning into a peerless sword. An incomparable sword intent burst out from the Destruction Sword Spirit, transmitted to the Sky Scorpio Sword, and then combined with the Congealing Water Sword to attack the thunder and fire energy. The 6th-step Destruction Sword intent attacked with full power. Puff! The thunder and fire energy collided with the Congealing Water Sword Spirit, erupting with astonishing energy fluctuations. The surrounding mountains were annihilated into nothingness by this energy fluctuation. What? Impossible? The masked man was stunned. This sword intent actually made him feel fear. It's the 6th-step Destruction Sword intent. He raised the Destruction Sword intent to the 6th step. The masked man muttered. Every step of the sword intent would increase its power by several times. The higher the sword intent's rank, the greater the gap between 2 ranks. The difference between the 5th and 6th step was more than 5 times, and the difference between the 6th and 7th step was more than 10 times. Yi Chen possessed the Destruction Sword intent. Raising it from the 5th step to the 6th step was equivalent to raising an ordinary sword intent from the 6th step to the 7th step. Chapter 885. I've finally broken through. Yi Chen's face flickered with joy. Raising his Destruction Sword Spirit from the peak of the 5th step to the 6th step wasn't hard for him. All he lacked was time. He didn't think that he would be able to save some time in this life-and-death situation. Chop! After cancelling out the masked man's ultimate attack, Yi Chen took a deep breath. The Destruction Sword Spirit in his Sea of Soul vibrated, and a peerless sword intent burst out, slashing down along his body. Vaguely, Yi Chen seemed to hear the scream of the starfire poison. The scream became weaker and weaker, and eventually stopped. After killing the starfire poison, Yi Chen felt a lot more relaxed. He lifted up his right index finger, and a small opening appeared on his fingertip. In the next second, the purple-red poison poured out of the opening, corroding the ground and leaving behind countless small burnt holes. There was even a burning flame shooting out of the holes. You've been poisoned by the starfire poison. The masked man recovered and noticed this scene. Killing the poison with the 6th-step Destruction Sword intent, seems like you know quite a bit. Same to you. Withdrawing his joy, Yi Chen's expression became calm. Although his Destruction Sword Spirit had reached the 6th step and its power had increased by 10 times, he still didn't have the confidence to defeat the masked man. It should be known that the masked man's Zhen Yuan was even purer than Poison Fire King's, and his profound martial skill had reached the upper high rank, a level higher than Yi Chen's Congealing Water. If not for the supreme grade Sky Scorpio Sword, even if his Destruction Sword Spirit had reached the 6th step, he still wouldn't be his opponent. Kid, you're quite modest, but you still have to die. The masked man's speed was extremely fast. Both of his hands were like phantoms of lightning, slapping palm after palm at Yi Chen. With each palm, thunder and fire would splash out. These thunder and fire were extremely dense, like heavy water. From this, one could see how high the masked man's attainments in the thunder and fire profounds were. The power of thunder and fire had been condensed to the extreme. Profound martial skills and Jin Yuan might not be comparable, but Yi Chen had the Sky Scorpio sword and the Destruction sword intent. With the bewitching purple long sword in his hand, Yi Chen didn't back off, facing the masked man head-on. Clang, clang, clang. Thunder, fire and sword chi splattered in all directions. Wherever the two of them went, everything within a radius of several tens of miles was razed to the ground. This was still within the Bloodlight Ocean. If it was outside, even 1,000 miles away would be affected. Thunder, fire, triple heavens. The masked man shouted loudly and struck out with his palm. His arm shook 3 times. Not good, it's a stacked attack. Yi Chen didn't expect the masked man to have such terrifying techniques even though he was only a mid-stage king. How could he know that the masked man was just a consciousness projection? Although his battle prowess was at the level of an ordinary mid-step king, the battle prowess he displayed surpassed mid-step kings of the same level. Soul light. The silver vertical eye between Yi Chen's eyebrows opened, and a beam of silver light shot out, hitting the masked man's forehead. At the same time, Yi Chen raised his sword to block the attack, and borrowed the momentum to retreat. Boom! Thunder, fire scattered everywhere, and a large amount of blood seeped out of the corner of Yi Chen's mouth. He had suffered a serious internal injury. Of course, the masked man wasn't in a good state either. He was just a consciousness projection, and his soul power was borrowed from the main body. Therefore, it wasn't very stable. After being hit by the soul light, the soul power stored in the core of his brain immediately leaked out, and his mental state became unstable. Damn it! The masked man was appalled. Yi Chen's soul light had dealt a huge blow to him. If he couldn't take care of Yi Chen in a short time, he wouldn't have another chance. Die! His figure shot out, and the masked man unleashed another thunder, fire, triple heavens, which was incomparably frightening. Seal. Yi Chen continued to increase the distance between them. With a wave of the Sky Scorpio sword, the masked man was sealed in a purple crystal mirror. His ultimate attack was affected, and 1 layer of power was destroyed, leaving only 2 layers. Moreover, the 2 layers weren't perfectly layered. Damn space profound. As a high-step king, the masked man naturally knew the terror and profoundness of space profound. Not only was space profound powerful, it was also second to none in terms of support. The mirror shattered, and numerous small wounds appeared on the masked man's body. What astonished Yi Chen was that there was no blood spurting out of these wounds. The opponent didn't seem to be a flesh life form. Consciousness projection, blocking the imperfect thunder, fire, triple heavens, Yi Chen suddenly understood. Merely a consciousness projection has such battle strength. Then, wouldn't his main body be a high-step king? The gap between life and death kings was also huge. Ordinary life and death kings were called low-step kings, and accomplished kings were called mid-step kings. Behind them were high-step kings, peak kings, and titled monarchs. Yi Chen's current strength barely reached mid-step king. The masked man was a bit stronger than him, roughly a mid-step king. As for the masked man's main body, he should be a high-step king. No wonder his profound martial skills were so powerful. As his wounds healed, the masked man's aura weakened somewhat, but his killing intent became even more abundant. Thunder, fire, rain. Forming seals with both hands, the masked man roared. Rumble. The sky darkened, and countless thunderbolts struck down on Yi Chen. Scarlet flames poured down like a torrential rain, turning the surrounding dozens of li into a sea of flames. Inside the sea of flames, Yi Chen could feel his protective Jin Yuan being incessantly burned, and his Jin Yuan consumption increased. As a thunderbolt struck down, his protective Jin Yuan trembled, and its consumption increased even more. He's planning to exhaust my Jin Yuan so that I won't be able to make a comeback. Battling life and death kings, Yi Chen's greatest weakness was his lack of Jin Yuan. Lacking Jin Yuan meant that the number of times he could use the undying body was also limited. At this moment, He had less than 50% Zhen Yuan remaining. If this continued, it would only continue to decrease, and he wouldn't even be able to use the undying body. At that time, he would truly be in danger. However, he's not feeling good either. He took a hit from my soul light, and his soul power should be on the verge of dissipating. Now, let's see who can persevere to the end. Knowing that the opponent was a consciousness projection, Yi Chen also knew his weakness. Extinguish. The sea of flames surged, and thunderbolts flew in all directions. Yi Chen tried his best to avoid the numerous thunderbolts. His figure shifted, and after another flicker, a second silver light beam shot out from between Yi Chen's brows. The masked man simply didn't have the time to dodge. The silver light beam was too fast. With a sway of his figure, the masked man's body turned slightly transparent, and a large amount of soul power leaked out, giving rise to a soul storm that could kill astral-reaching experts. Losing the control of his soul power, the consciousness projection also began to collapse. Zhen Yuan gushed out, diluting into the ordinary Yuan Qi of the world. Unfortunately, I can only use soul light twice. Yi Chen was confident that the third soul light would be able to extinguish the opponent's soul power. Add more fire. Unable to use soul light, Yi Chen held the Sky Scorpio sword and slashed out a meteor-like congealing water sword energy. If you can take this move, I'll spare your life today. The masked man roared, and his collapsing consciousness projection unexpectedly stopped collapsing. His soul power also stopped leaking out, condensing again. Peng. Shattering Yi Chen's congealing water sword energy with a palm strike, the masked man's figure faintly swayed. In the next moment, his entire body shot out toward Yi Chen, looking like he wanted to perish together with him. You want to perish together with me? No, even if he self-destructs, he won't be able to kill me. He probably still has some powerful killing moves. Yi Chen didn't dare to be careless. He pushed his sword domain to the limit, producing a sword pressure that froze the space. Anything that wanted to approach Yi Chen would have to use twice the power. Seal again. The bewitching mirror shattering sealed the masked man. However, the price was that his consciousness projection continued to collapse, and its speed became more and more exaggerated. His body became more and more illusory. Thunderfire four-layered sky. If it were his real body, the masked man could easily use Thunderfire four-layered sky. However, the price of using his consciousness projection was mutual destruction. Therefore, he wouldn't use this move unless it was absolutely necessary. How frightening would the four-layered palm energies be? Yi Chen couldn't even imagine it. I can't be hit by this move. Otherwise, even if I don't die, I'll be crippled. Within the range of the sword domain, countless blue swords shot out. Above Yi Chen's head, the evil shattering sword and broken blood sword each separated into 33. Two sword snakes intertwined and shot out. Unfortunately, the masked man's palm was too powerful. All of the blue swords were destroyed, and the sword snakes were also shattered. The evil shattering sword and broken blood sword were blown away. The half-step extreme grade broken blood sword even had its tip broken, its radiance dimming. Die. The masked man had already arrived in front of Yi Chen, pressing his palm over. Go all out. Circulating green lotus sword arts to the limit, a large amount of Zhen Yuan poured into the Sky Scorpio sword. Crack. Sky Scorpio sword was covered in a thick layer of purple crystals, which became thicker and thicker. Eventually, it looked like a purple crystal board, blocking in front of Yi Chen. The masked man's palm pressed on the surface of the Sky Scorpio sword, and the four-layered palm energy exploded. Peng. Purple light rain poured down from the sky. Yi Chen's feet rubbed the ground as he was blown back, shattering one mountain after another. Lightning flames scattered all over his body. He should be dead. The masked man's mouth curved into a smile. Then, his illusory body suddenly dissipated, and the mask on his face shattered into thousands of pieces. Dozens of li away, inside a scorched mountain, Yi Chen was lying inside, his life or death unknown. After a while, rocks started to roll. Yi Chen raised an arm and supported himself on the ground, climbing up with difficulty. Cough. Blood flowed uncontrollably from the corner of his mouth, as if it was free. So dangerous. If I hadn't consumed so much Zhen Yuan to activate the crystal power of the Sky Scorpio sword, that palm could have taken my life. The crystal power of the Sky Scorpio sword came from the purple crystal iron. Normally, Yi Chen would only use the Sky Scorpio sword normally. But just now, it was too dangerous, so he had no choice but to use the power of the purple crystal iron. The price was that the crystal power of the Sky Scorpio sword had weakened. Recover. As his Zhen Yuan flowed like water, Yi Chen's injuries rapidly recovered. However, due to his heavy injuries, Yi Chen's Zhen Yuan was left with less than 5%, almost bottoming out. I can't stay here for long. I need to find a place to recover my Zhen Yuan. The battle had caused too big of a commotion, so Yi Chen didn't dare to stay here. Swish. With a flicker, Yi Chen dashed out of the mountain, randomly choosing a direction. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.